Chapter 182. Because of the battle between the White Bone God and Zhuangting, the entire Maplewood City had sunk into the gap between the netherworld and the modern world. It became an ugly scar that could not be erased from the Zhuang territory, lying between Wangjiang City and Sanshan City. Outside the city there was a life tablet. The material was precious and inscribed with array patterns. It had already become a magic artifact. It was said that the inscription on the tablet was personally written by the Zhuang Emperor. The imperial edict had sinned himself and made the White Bone Path his national enemy. The purpose of this tablet was to appease the souls of the dead and comfort the living. However, only those who could truly see the netherworld understood that this life tablet had no meaning other than fooling the people. Because it was scratching an itch outside the Maplewood City, it could not appease anyone. The current Maplewood City did not belong to the netherworld, nor did it exist in the modern world. This also meant that the souls wandering around here would never be able to transcend and never be reincarnated. They would suffer for eternity. Unless Zhuang Gaoxian personally entered the gap between the two worlds, his pitiful citizens would not have a chance of being appeased. However, the Maplewood City that had been eroded by the netherworld Qi was almost half of the White Bone God's home ground. How could the ruler of a country take such a risk? The silence in the Maplewood City was almost maddening. Ling He remembered that there were sounds here at first. Cries, shouts, howls, cries of pain, curses, sobs. Those sounds were very sad and uncomfortable to listen to, but after all, there were still sounds. Later, as the netherworld Qi gradually spread, those sounds disappeared bit by bit. They had disappeared for a long time. He had watched the little girl with a ponytail in his arms die. Her breath and temperature left her little body bit by bit. No matter how hard he tried, rummaging through the ruins for food and medicine, he could not stop her from leaving. At that time, Ling He suddenly realized. He had saved her from the roof beam, or he had only made her suffer more. Big brother, why didn't you save me? We worked hard, paid taxes to the country, and supported your cultivation. You are a transcendent cultivator. Why didn't you protect us? I'm in so much pain. Ling He shook his head and tried to shake these images and voices out of his mind. It was all just a painful hallucination. But it was these painful illusions that reminded him that he was still alive. More and more moments of absent-mindedness made Ling He realize that he didn't have much time left to be conscious. In such a place, no one could avoid the corrosion of the netherworld aura. But every time he woke up, he would do his own thing. He was doing a very simple thing, burying all the corpses he could see, digging and filling graves for each of them, chanting for deliverance. People believe, only when one is buried can one be at peace. The earth is a compassionate mother who embraces all her lost children. The first person he buried was the little girl with the ponytail. He didn't even know her name. A small grave outside the illustrious Virtue Hall was her new home. Ling He recited the Taishang Salvation Scripture for her to release her soul. The Taishang Salvation Sutra itself did not have any specific spells or supernatural powers, but it was indeed a sutra that all Taoists knew how to recite. There was a history of this scripture. According to legend, in ancient times, there was a hunter who went deep into the mountains to shoot a tiger. There, he met a Taoist priest under a pine tree. The Taoist priest said that he was plagued by sin and that his time was coming to an end. He asked him what his plans were. The hunter begged to extend his life. The Taoist priest made him swear to throw away his bow and never kill again. This way, after he died, the Taoist priest would release him. The hunter agreed and left. That winter, the hunter suddenly fell ill and died. But there was still a finger on his left hand that was warm. His family did not bury him immediately. 3 days later, the hunter was revived. According to him, when he died, 2 messengers in yellow led him to the underworld with official documents. One of the officials held a black book and said to him, "You have sinned deeply. You should go to hell." He was terrified. he suddenly thought of the Taoist priest and prayed in his heart. At this time, auspicious clouds appeared in the northwest sky. The Taoist priest sat in a cloud carriage and descended from the sky, hanging in front of the hall. The officials in the underworld bowed to him. The Taoist priest said, "I have a disciple here. I am here to release his soul." With that, he took out a scripture and gave it to the hunter, ordering him to recite it. After the hunter finished reciting the scripture, the Taoist priest disappeared. At this time, one of the messengers in yellow led the hunter to his house. Hearing the sound of crying in the house, the hunter was revived. All of this was like a dream. But the hunter sat there and recalled the scripture, writing it down without missing a single word. After that, he recited the scripture every day. A few years later, he left home to cultivate, disappearing without a trace. But this scripture was also copied and spread, becoming a Taoist scripture. Its name was the Taishang Salvation Scripture. In today's world, there were many schools of thought. When cultivators choose a school, most of them consider the power of their techniques, the depth of their foundation, and the size of their school. However, many people had forgotten the original spirit and ideals of these sects and schools. For example, the Confucian school, educating without discrimination and opening up the wisdom of the people. For example, the legalist school, establishing rules and binding the world. For example, the Taoist school was not only the oldest cultivation school. Its earliest birth was the beginning of the path of cultivation, where countless people fought bravely and summed up the path of cultivation. For example, praying for blessings, releasing the souls of the dead, and so on, was one of the duties of the Taoist priest. But in today's world, how many cultivators were high above, looking down on all living things? In a world where great power belonged to oneself, the strong were always strong, and the weak were always sad. The cracks in the ground destroyed the entire Maplewood city, but after everything calmed down, the land seemed to silently accept the ruins. Ling He found the corpses of people one by one from the ruins and buried them one by one. First, he buried all the children in Mingda Hall and their teachers. Then, he buried Xuanwu Street, Qingmu Avenue, Pegasus Alley. Bit by bit, he walked forward, leaving behind one grave after another. No one pitied this land, no one saved the people here, and no one released their souls. Then, Ling He would do it. This was a destined vast project, and he might not be able to complete it in his lifetime. Not to mention that his life was destined to be short. Perhaps tomorrow, or perhaps the next moment, he would be completely corroded by the netherworld qi. Just like everyone else in this city, they would die without anyone knowing. But before he died, he still had to do it. Far away in qi, Jiang Wang didn't know that there was still someone struggling to move forward in the dead Maplewood city. Just like Du Yehu, who was becoming more and more silent and bloodthirsty in Zhejiang County, he didn't know how hard Xiaowu, who he had always despised for being lazy, was working now. At least at this moment, everyone was moving forward alone. They couldn't see the road ahead, couldn't see hope. It was the same. They never stopped. They didn't know that in a distant place, someone was responding to them from afar. They all thought that the response was only in their hearts. This was an extremely difficult path. It was like this for everyone. Jiang Wang didn't relax for a moment. The divine ability Inner Palace had considerable potential, but before it was realized, it was only potential. At this moment, he was already sitting in a carriage and was heading toward Qiyang County. In the carriage, the illusory flower extinguished, the crown of thorns formed and dispersed. He was making use of the time to repeatedly practice the 3 new Tao techniques he had obtained. The benefits of laying the foundation for the heavenly cycle star formation were now fully displayed. He almost didn't have to worry about the consumption of Tao energy. Of course, this trip to Qiyang County was also to increase his strength. For him, as long as it was a Tao technique that had been passed down in the world, he had a way to deal with it, no matter how strong it was. At least until now, the 3 major sword moves that he had learned from his experiences and merged into his sword arts were his most powerful technique. But before that, he needed a truly good sword. Chapter 183. Qiyang County was located in the south of Qi. It was rich in minerals, and most of the people in the county worked with iron. Looking down from the sky, Qi territory was red. That was why it was called Qiyang. As the saying went, Qi's soldiers are in Qiyang, and Qiyang's soldiers are in Nanyao. Nanyao City was where the Lian family had operated for many years. It was not a county, but it was better than a county. When people mentioned Qiyang County, they could only think of Nanyao City. They could not remember which city was the county. The city lord of Nanyao City was never transferred, so his surname could only be Lian. This showed the status of the Lian family in Nanyao City, and even the entire Qiyang County. The Lian family was not a family born in Qi. After their home country was destroyed, they moved to Qi. In Scarlet Sun County, he cut open a mountain to obtain copper and took root. From nothing to something, he established South Distant City. They were now famous in the world. There were 5 sacred grounds for blacksmiths in the world. The Lian family of Nanyao was in Qi territory. The carriage sped on the wide road. Jiang Wang would occasionally lift the curtain to look at the scenery outside the window. He thought of something that was very strange to him. The official roads of the state of Qi didn't have any runes carved on them. Along the way, many people in Qi territory were walking in the wilderness. He saw clearly that many of them had no cultivation. In fact, he had noticed this when he entered Linhai County. However, he was so focused on exploring the Tianfu secret realm that he neglected it. Thinking of this, he could not help but ask, why don't the roads in Qi territory need formation patterns? The people in Qi territory can go out freely. Are there no dangers in the wilderness? The person driving Jiang Wang was a Zhonggenjia coachman. He had been driving for the Zhonggenjia for generations. In an aristocratic family like the Zhonggenjia, there were many such servants. They were much more reliable than the servants hired from the market. He did not dare to neglect Cheng Gongxing's guest. However, he was confused. What dangers are there in the wilderness? Jiang Wang pondered for a while and asked, are there no ferocious beasts in Qi territory? The coachman scratched his head. There are at most some deer and foxes around here. They can't be considered ferocious beasts, right? There might be some tigers, leopards, jackals, and wolves in the mountains over there. Jiang Wang fell silent. He also wanted to ask where the meridian unlocking pills that Qi cultivators needed came from. However, the coachman was destined not to know the answer to this question. He didn't even know what a ferocious beast was. In the Zhuang country, the first thing that almost all of the commoners had to remember before they left home was, do not leave the official road. This was because the wilderness was filled with danger and ferocious beasts. Even the official roads were not absolutely safe. Those traveling merchants risked their lives to travel through the various places. All the cultivators in the Zhuang country had no choice but to regularly patrol the areas near their residences to eliminate any hidden dangers. On Qi, ordinary people could also go for a walk in the wild and have fun. They were all ordinary people, but they were born in different countries, and yet their lives were so different. This was the life that Jiang Wang envied. He casually summoned the cloud crane, picked some interesting ones, and wrote down his recent experiences. At the same time, he also told his sister that he had successfully explored the Tianfu mystic realm and reserved the magical power of the inner mansion. He told her to work hard. Of course, he skipped over the dangers and only talked about the magical places. Then, he talked about the delicacies in Qi to tempt an An's appetite. A single letter was already packed to the brim. Jiang Wang thought about it and wrote a letter to Yi Qingyu, thanking her repeatedly for taking care of Jiang Enan. He briefly talked about his cultivation progress and some problems in the application of Daoist technique. Along the way, he found ferocious beasts in many countries, except for the Yun nation and Qi. Therefore, he casually asked where the meridian unlocking pills in the Yun nation came from. After he finished writing the 2 letters, the coachman reminded him that they were about to arrive at Nanyao City. Jiang Wang stopped writing and watched the cloud crane disappear into the clouds. Now that he temporarily stopped in Qi, he was not worried that the cloud crane would get lost. However, Qi and the Yun nation were thousands of miles apart. It would take more than 10 days to go back and forth. Nanyao City was tall and majestic. Before he got close, he could already feel the heat. The whole city was filled with a scorching feeling. The streets were bustling with noise. The people in Nanyao City were generally tall and strong, with reddish and dark skin. Probably because they lived by the stove all year round, the people here had a fiery temper. Jiang Wang occasionally saw people bargaining with the peddlers. It was so intense that it seemed like they were going to fight. "Are you selling this for 50 knife coins? Don't even think about it. I think other people are selling it for 40 knife coins. Then go find someone else. I'll find you. I'm not selling it." Jiang Wang silently lowered the curtain. The currency in Qi and its affiliated countries was mainly knife coins, supplemented by gold and silver. The Zhuang nation used knife coins for historical reasons, which had nothing to do with Qi. It was also different from the ring coins commonly used in Taoist countries. The knife coins of Zhuang and Qi were completely different in terms of shape and details. Of course, the knife coins of Qi were much more durable than the knife coins of Zhuang. Nanyao City was different from all the cities that Jiang Wang had seen since he entered Qi. The atmosphere of the whole city was slightly alienated. It probably followed the customs of the old country that had been annihilated in the long river of history. Qi had a large territory and abundant resources. It had conquered many countries and conquered them. Therefore, there were many different customs in Qi, but they did not affect the rule of Qi. Sitting in the carriage of Chongxian, Jiang Wang naturally did not encounter any trouble. He went all the way to Lian Kei's house without any obstruction. This guy lived in the central area of Nanyao City. His house was luxurious. Hearing the news, Lian Kei quickly rushed out of the door. He probably had been waiting for a long time. Without greeting, he pulled Jiang Wang to the family's sword furnace. The so-called sword furnace, as the name suggested, was a place where the Lian family specialized in forging swords. The Lian family forged all kinds of weapons with different weapon furnaces. Lian Kei naturally wanted to use the best one. Only this furnace could represent the Lian family's sword furnace. It was said that the fire of this furnace was brought by the ancestors of the Lian family when they migrated from their old country. It had been burning since then. After so many years, it was not extinguished. It had its own history. Speaking of the Lian family's sword furnace, it was this one. Outsiders were not allowed to enter, but with Lian Kei leading the way, it was a different story. Especially since Jiang Wang was the owner of this sword. According to the rules, he was qualified to enter the sword furnace. As he walked deeper, Jiang Wang became more and more frightened. He originally thought that Lian Kei would make a good magic weapon for him. But judging from this sword furnace, it was far from that. Before he got close to the sword furnace, he saw broken swords inserted into the ground like a forest. He could not tell whether these broken swords were good or bad. He only felt that each of them was very sharp. Following Lian Kei, he walked on a small path in the forest of sword. It seemed that he was following some kind of formation. Then, his eyes lit up as he saw a huge, fiery red furnace. This furnace was about the size of an ordinary house. The furnace was facing the outside, like a monster's huge mouth. The fire in the furnace burned almost constantly, occasionally jumping up and down. Bang bang, bang bang, bang bang. What he felt was not the fire of the furnace, but the heartbeat of an ancient wild beast. Chapter 184. Only now did Jiang Wang understand. Why, even someone as powerful as Chung Gungxing was envious of Lien Ke for helping him forge a sword. Just from this sword furnace alone, it was definitely not an ordinary item. There was only one furnace in the sword forest. Outside the sword furnace, there was not even a shed. It was probably not afraid of wind and rain. At this moment, there was no one else other than Lien Ke and Jiang Wang. This furnace had been decided by Lien Ke today. Lien Ke performed a complicated ancient ceremony in front of the sword furnace. He knelt and prostrated himself, muttering words in a very pious manner. It was probably the inherent etiquette of the Lien family before forging a sword. They did not force others. However, Jiang Wang also bowed 3 times seriously. The fire in this furnace had not been extinguished even when his country was destroyed and he left his home. This heavy feeling of crossing the river of time was worthy of his respect. After the ceremony, Lien Ke stood up and asked, "Have you thought about what kind of sword you want?" Jiang Wang was stumped by the question. Shouldn't this be something a weapon forger should consider? Lien Ke saw his expression and knew that he had not thought about it. He shook his head and said, "This is your sword. It will grow into your heart, your mind, and your hand. You must first understand your hand, your mind, and your heart. Meditate here for a while and empty your mind." Lien Ke walked to the back of the sword furnace and said, "I will sort out the materials again. My hand, my mind, my heart?" Jiang Wang had been asking his heart all the way here. He was very clear about what he wanted. He had been moving forward resolutely. However, he had not thought about what kind of sword he wanted. It seemed that the stronger, the better. Was it sharp? Was it sturdy? Was it engraved with extraordinary Tao techniques? Was it endlessly powerful? He respected Lien Ke's authority as a weapon forger. He did not care if the ground was clean. He immediately sat cross-legged and began to meditate, emptying his mind and body. Lien Ke was rubbing the ores by the sword furnace. When he turned around and saw Jiang Wang meditating, he could not help but nod. No matter what reason the him in the Tianfu secret realm handed over his life tablet, at least now it seemed that he had not misjudged him in the Tianfu secret realm. This person's talent and temperament were top-notch. After Jiang Wang entered a meditative state, he lost all sense of time and emptied his mind. It was a mysterious feeling. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders, and his mind was clear. But that didn't mean that he had let his guard down. The sound of chatter and laughter suddenly entered his ears. A group of people walked out of the sword formation and arrived in front of the sword furnace. Jiang Wang opened his eyes and saw the young man in the lead greeting Lien Ke. He said in a neutral tone, "Yo, brother Lien Ke, why are you here?" Lien Ke did not seem like a good-tempered person, but for some reason, he was not angry at this person. He only said, "In the next few days, the sword furnace will be sealed until I finish forging the sword. Lien Shao, if you want to see the sword furnace, I'm afraid you'll have to wait for a while." Lien Shao had the appearance of a typical South Far City citizen. His skin was rather dark, and he was tall and strong. His face was square and broad, and his facial features could be considered regular. Of course, just her facial features alone were already much better than Lien Ke's. "Even if it's you, you only have 3 chances in your life. You gave it away just like that?" Lien Shao pretended to be surprised. He turned his head to look at Jiang Wang, who was meditating on the ground. "Who is this person?" he asked while knowing the answer. Lien Ke had participated in the Heavenly Palace Mystery Domain with great fanfare and came out empty-handed. The news had already spread throughout South Far City. Now, many people were saying that he had knelt down and begged for mercy in the Heavenly Palace Mystery Domain, and even gave up his life tablet to save his life. The reason why he had put so much effort into forging the weapon for Jiang Wang. Because this was a deal that had been made in the Heavenly Palace Mystery Domain. No one knew who spread these words, but there was no way to refute them. After all, No one remembered what had happened in the Heavenly Palace mystery domain. It was a fact that Lien Ke had obtained nothing and had even given up his life tablet. Since Lien Ke was not angry, Jiang Wang would not force himself to speak up. He just sat there cross-legged and said, "I am Jiang Wang. I am not considered a saint. I am just Brother Lien Ke's friend." "So it is Brother Jiang. I have heard of your name for a long time." Lien Shao cupped his hands in greeting and smiled. "Thank you for returning my brother Lien Ke's life tablet. You are truly noble." After the Heavenly Palace mystery domain ended, Jiang Wang was no longer a nobody in Qi. Firstly, he had reserved the divine ability Inner Palace. Secondly, he was a good friend of Chung Gongxing. Just these 2 points. As long as Lien Shao was not stupid to a certain extent, he would not provoke him for no reason. Most of his hostility was directed at Lien Quebec. Jiang Wang shook his head. "You might not be familiar with me now, but you will know me in the future. I am not someone who likes to threaten others. If there is a grudge, it will usually end in life and death. The life tablet should be a proof that Brother Lien Ke gave me. Of course, I will not be so thick-skinned as to threaten you with it." From Lien Shao's words, he realized that Lien Ke was facing a difficult situation. He had to come out and explain, no matter what had happened in the Heavenly Palace mystery domain. Lien Ke was doing his best to forge the sword for him. This was what he should do. Moreover, he would be staying in Qi for a while. It was necessary for the people in Qi to understand him. These words were not only to testify for Lien Ke, but also to show his attitude and strength. On the other hand, Lien Ke himself did not seem to care. He only ordered him to leave. "All right, Lien Shao. You can still stay here before the sword forging begins. I will start forging the sword now. According to the rules, you have to leave." Mockery was useless. Provocation was not a response. Since he had brought up the family rules, Lien Shao had no reason to stay. He could only leave angrily with his people. Jiang Wang watched him walk back to the sword formation thoughtfully. "You seem to be very confused. Why is my temper so good?" Lien Ke asked as he walked over. Jiang Wang smiled embarrassedly. "I am just a little curious. Lien Shao is not a bad person." Lien Ke walked over and formed a seal to seal the sword formation. Then he said casually, "He is just a pitiful person." Jiang Wang looked at him questioningly. "There are only 10 people in each generation in the Lien family who can control their life tablet. I am one of them. He is not." Lien Ke only said this sentence and did not explain further. When Jiang Wang had heard about the life tablets outside the Heavenly Palace mystic realm, he had felt puzzled. No matter where one was, it was a sad thing to have one's life and death controlled by others. The Lien family was famous. Why would they establish such a system? But Lien Ke did not intend to say more, so he did not ask further. "Come over and sit on the mat on the left side of the sword furnace." Lien Ke directed and handed over a crimson-red round stone the size of a baby's fist. "Cover it with both hands and input Tao energy." Jiang Wang naturally did as he was told. Lien Ke explained, "This is the fire stone corresponding to the sword furnace. The sword furnace itself has enough firepower. You have to input Tao energy so that during the sword forging process, your sword will be more familiar with you and will be more suitable for your heart. When you input Tao energy, it is best to empty your mind and meditate. This way, the Tao energy input will be purer and more representative of your heart. When your Tao energy is exhausted, you can stop. There is no need to force it. It will not affect my sword forging." He added, "Of course, it will be better if you can persevere for a longer period of time." Lien Ke did not bring over a pile of Tao energy stones for Jiang Wang to replenish at any time. Because, under normal circumstances, Tao energy stones could not be extracted immediately. There had to be a breathing adjustment process. This process would interrupt the infusion of Tao energy. There were specializations. On the matter of sword forging, Jiang Wang trusted Lien Ke unconditionally and did not give any suggestions or ideas. He was not arrogant enough to use his shallow knowledge to challenge the thousands of years of weapon-forging history of the Lien family. He would do whatever Lien Ke said. He sat cross-legged on the mat on the left side of the sword furnace and closed his eyes. And his Tao energy continuously flowed towards the crimson-red round stone in his hand. Pung pung, pung pung, pung pung. For a moment it seemed like the entire world was silent. Only the sound of the fire jumping could be heard. It was hard to say which side was attached to which side. In short, it slowly overlapped with his own heartbeat. Chapter 185. Lien Ke paid close attention to the fire in the sword furnace. He methodically put in all sorts of precious materials. If a discerning person saw this, they would understand the price Lien Ke had paid. Among them, there was no lack of priceless materials like flowing gold stone and drinking light mud. In terms of value, they were completely worthy of Jiang Wang's life jade. The people of the Lien family were born with life jade, so they especially cherished their freedom. Lien Ke said that even if he died, he would not hand over his life jade. This was not a lie. If not for the fact that there was no other way in the Tianfu mystic domain, he would not have used it as proof, because only the life jade could show that he did not owe anyone anything. Therefore, the moment he found out that the life jade was on Jiang Wang, he roughly understood the choice he had made in the Tianfu mystic domain. Jiang Wang did not let him choose wrongly, and he would not let Jiang Wang choose wrongly. The Lien family's direct bloodline only had 3 chances to forge an ancient furnace in their lifetime. Normally, they would only use it to break through the blacksmith bottleneck, and he was willing to use this precious opportunity to forge a sword for Jiang Wang. Lien Ke's strength was not bad. If not for those people's schemes in the Tianfu mystic domain, he might not have been eliminated, and he was especially talented in the path of blacksmithing. Otherwise, he would not have become one of the only 10 disciples of the Lien family to hold his own life jade. The materials gradually melted in the sword furnace, and he put in different seals. Every step was as precise as a Mahist mechanism, and from the beginning to the end, Jiang Wang just sat by the side and poured in his Tao energy. In the blink of an eye, 3 days and 3 nights passed. Lien Ke was really surprised by the density of Jiang Wang's Tao energy. 3 days and 3 nights had passed, but Jiang Wang did not have any intention of exhausting his Tao energy. What he did not know was, now Jiang Wang had 9 star river vortexes and the star twining spirit snake. Even if he did not break through his meridians, he could automatically produce 84 Tao energy stones every day, which was more than 99%. If Jiang Wang was a Tao energy stone mine, he could produce 100 Tao energy stones almost every day. Needless to say, he had been cultivating diligently and had never stopped his morning and evening classes. If it weren't for the fact that the practice of Taoist magic arts and the cleansing of the heaven and earth gate also consumed a lot of Taoist energy, the Tongtian Palace would have been full of resources long ago. Lien Ke still woke up Jiang Wang from his meditation. The smelting stage is over. You can relax and rest now. I'll call you when I need you. Jiang Wang immediately stopped. Actually, 3 days and 3 nights of Tao energy infusion did not make him tired. Because he had been in a meditative state, his mental state was extremely good. Since Lien Ke was focused on forging the sword, he would not be so bored. He stopped 3 days of breaking through Meridian's cultivation to make up for his homework. After that was the 4 spirits body refinement art. Over time, the Azure Dragon chapter and Vermilion Bird chapter had already reached perfection. As for the Xuanwu chapter, it was originally slow to progress. However, after Yu Guo saw the giant tortoise, its majestic aura and the powerful charm of the Baxia bloodline gave Jiang Wang a lot of inspiration, allowing him to progress in the Xuanwu chapter almost overnight. He was now focusing on the White Tiger chapter. He was only one step away from the Four Spirits Body Refinement Art. After completing the cultivation of the Four Spirits Body Refinement Art, he began to practice the 3 Tao techniques that Chung Gung Xing had found. Not to mention that Tai, who had already engraved the Heavenly Palace, he still needed to familiarize himself with the Sea of Flowers and the Bramble Crown before he could command them. Just like that, 3 days passed. Lien Ke was infatuated with refining and adjusting the mineral fluid. Only now did he relax a little. He glanced at Jiang Wang and could not help but ask in surprise, "Have you always been so hard-working in your cultivation? Don't you need to rest and relax?" "I'm used to it." Lien Ke nodded. "It's not without reason that you were able to become the winner of the Heavenly Palace Mystery Territory." After thinking for a while, he said, "Your sword is about to take shape. Do you have any ideas?" Jiang Wang looked at him and said seriously, "You've worked hard." These were not empty words. He had been cultivating diligently, but he could see how hard Lien Ke worked. It was not an exaggeration to say that at this time, in his eyes, Lien Ke's ugly face that was especially clear in the light of the furnace fire seemed much cuter. Lien Ke looked at the situation in the sword furnace and said, "I'm asking about your thoughts on the sword. Not towards me." Jiang Wang smiled. "You are from a family of forging, a genius in forging." "I don't have any ideas." "I believe you." Lien Ke shrugged and did not speak again. After about half an incense stick's time, his hands moved and he sent in a series of seals. Finally, his right hand pulled outwards. A stream of scalding metal liquid leapt out of the sword furnace. Just as it was exposed to the air, it gave off a crackling sound. It was as though the foundation of everything in the world was the condensation of this liquid. The metal liquid solidified into a crimson-red metal bar, and then quickly turned black. Finally, Lien Ke placed it on an anvil at the side. "Come, you can forge it yourself." Lien Ke handed over a hammer the size of a human head. The moment Jiang Wang took it, his hand sank. He had to mobilize his Tao energy to stabilize it. He could not help but be shocked. One had to know that with his current physique, his hand had the strength of at least 500 kilograms, but it was still strenuous for him to lift this hammer. "I'll go make the final preparations. You're in charge of forging the sword billet. Forge the front side 5,000 times, then the back side 5,000 times, and so on. Don't stop until I say stop." After Lien Ke warned him, he turned and walked into the sword formation. Behind him, the sound of forging iron could already be heard. After an unknown period of time, Jiang Wang really did not remember the time. He was too tired. He could not even feel his arms. They were completely numb. Although he had mastered many methods to circulate energy, in the end, he could only rely on his body. He persevered completely with his astonishing willpower, relying on the Tao energy that was continuously produced by the starry river vortex. Lien Ke did not appear. He even suspected that this guy had gone home to sleep. But he should not have slept for so long. At first, he could still think about these trivial things. Later, he could only empty himself. Since Lien Ke said not to stop, then he could not stop. After all, this was his sword. There was nothing in front of him, and no one behind him. He was the only person he could rely on. Persistence was the only thing he could rely on. After countless rounds of forging, he vaguely formed a connection with the sword billets. It was a very weak feeling, but because it was sharp, it was not easy to ignore. Later, Jiang Wang unconsciously started to circulate the White Tiger Body Tempering Scripture. The Four Spirits Body Tempering Scripture was derived from the White Tiger Body Tempering Scripture, and the White Tiger Body Tempering Scripture was the most important part. Now that he had reached the last chapter of the Four Spirits Body Tempering Scripture, the sword was secretly compatible with West Gold. As he forged, Jiang Wang's arm gradually regained feeling. At first, it was soreness, then it was intense pain. He gritted his teeth and endured it. Finally, he felt the blood flowing in his arm, strong and warm. The white tiger body tempering scripture progressed rapidly. Just as he was getting used to it and was gradually getting better, he heard Lien Kei's voice. "It's done." Lien Kei's voice was very tired. Jiang Wang subconsciously stopped. The excitement brought about by cultivating the four spirits body tempering scripture disappeared, and he suddenly felt weak all over. Lien Kei did not care about him. His hands were red, and he directly grabbed the sword billets that had been repeatedly forged until they were scorching hot, and threw them back into the furnace. "For the past 3 days and 3 nights, I have fasted and refined my mind, and used the secret method of the Lien family. I have made full preparations." It turned out that another 3 days and 3 nights had passed. Jiang Wang thought in a daze. "I asked you to meditate and empty your mind because I wanted your purest Tao essence. I wanted your sword to sense you through your Tao essence when it was born. Then I asked you to forge the sword billets to carry out your essence, Qi and spirit and the Samadhi." Lien Kei's hand gestures were very fast, and his expression was crazy. "So I don't have to ask you anymore. This is the sword you want the most. Now you can give it a name." Jiang Wang reluctantly looked up. His eyes suddenly lit up. His eyes seemed to be stung by something, and a drop of tear flowed down. In front of Jiang Wang's eyes, the sword billets, whose specific shape could not be seen, rose in the furnace fire. But the sharpness, the aura, had already attracted him. At this moment, thousands of images flashed through his mind. It was like the moonlight that could not be avoided. When you saw it, you were already enveloped by it. When he was instilling Tao essence and forging the sword billets, he had completely emptied his mind. In a sense, the sword billets before him were a reflection of the depths of his heart. But what was buried in the depths of Jiang Wang's heart? It was the bright moon that could never be touched, the dream that was gradually drifting away, and the hometown that he could never return to. With an indescribable feeling, Jiang Wang said emotionally, "Let's call it yearning for growth." Yearning for growth. Lien Kei murmured this name, staring blankly at the sword billets. There was no true weaponsmith who did not have feelings for the weapons he forged, but he did feel something from this incomplete sword that touched his heart. On the original site of the Lien family's homeland, the present state of Great Xia stood. But the state of Great Xia was not the country that destroyed the Lien family's homeland. The country before the state of Great Xia had already been destroyed by the state of Great Xia. Hatred could not be found either. When the homeland was destroyed, the Lien family fled and moved to Qi. For many years after that, the Lien family was a foreigner, and so was the Lien family. At first, the Lien family was not recognized by the local people of Qi and was ostracized. They could not gain the trust of the imperial court of Qi. No matter how outstanding their descendants were, they could not be entrusted with important tasks. Because they missed their homeland, which was in the south. The Lien family named the city they built Nanyao. After so many years of development, the old country had long disappeared in the dust of history. The Lien family gradually earned a place in Qi with their rising reputation among weaponsmiths. But the discrimination never disappeared, and the estrangement always existed. Outside the full moon lake, Chung Gongxing told Jiang Wang not to be afraid of the Lien family. Although it was to support his friend, it also reflected this phenomenon to some extent. In the hearts of many Lien family members, they also had a homeland that they could never return to. They would always be foreigners. Lien Kei slowly stopped. He put a ball of light wrapped around the sword into Jiang Wang's hand. It was like handing over a beam of moonlight. The light dissipated. But see, the sword stem was slightly flat, and the sword guard was like a full moon. The lines of the sword hoop were entangled like yearning. The sword spine was straight, and the sword guard was sharp and thin. The sword was shining with cold light. The sword edge was hidden. In terms of color, the sword hilt was as black as ink, and the sword body was as white as snow. There was no blemish. On the sword ridge, near the sword guard, there were 3 words of Qi inscribed. It said, "Swallow returns to nest." The sword was named Longing for Chang Xiang, and the sword inscription was Swallow returns to nest. Longing for Chang Xiang, representing Jiang Wang in Nanya. Longing for Chang Xiang, swallow returns to nest. Wine stored in the frost and drunk in March. Flowers like makeup, willows like waste. I'm willing to send the date of return to swallow. Rushing east and west, always far away. 1. Crossing thousands of mountains with one heart, after thousands of mountains, the wings grow old. Looking at the eaves, there is no one. Spring swallows can't fly back to their nest. Wandering in the old city, crying in the air. The 4 o'clock is over, and the cold and heat have disappeared. 2. I want to ask where the villagers are. The lost people are in Nanyao. Longing is always like a knife. Note sad face 1. Zhuang State is in the west of Qi. 2. The 4 o'clock is over because Maplewood City has stopped at that time forever, and there is no more spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Swallows don't come and go anymore. I always feel that there should be a poem to go with this sword. So I wrote it in the shoes of Jiang Wang. Jiang Wang himself is not a person who plays with words and ink. This poem does not mean that he will have talent in this area. It's purely my feelings for him. At the same time, I also hope that readers can understand these feelings more. Chapter 186. Just as the sword Sauvignon fell into Jiang Wang's hands, it was as if the painting saint had put down the finishing touch, and a true dragon left the shaft. Jiang Wang felt that his hand had been longing for this sword. He also felt that this sword had been longing for his hand. The moment he held the sword, he felt that his sword move was complete. At this moment, he knew what the sword move he had swung in the Heavenly Palace secret realm was, because that sword move had already taken shape in his heart. All his fatigue was swept away. If not for the fact that the sword furnace was here, he would have pressed down on his sword and wanted to dance. It was only when he held Sauvignon that his essence, energy, and spirit merged into one that this sword was truly forged. One clang. The sword hummed. The sound of Sauvignon was like a declaration. At this moment, the huge sword formation guarding the Lien clan sword furnace moved. Countless broken swords hummed. It was as if they were cheering, but also as if they were unwilling to dim. The sword light was like a star, and the sword light was like a ray of light. Sword energy soared into the sky, and the sword hummed in all directions. The entire Lien clan, no, the entire south-distant city was in an uproar. The sword formation hummed. This was the sign of a famous weapon being born. There was a saying in the history books, only the weapon and the name cannot be fake. The ruler is in charge. This sentence meant that only power could not be given to others, and the ruler could use it for himself. The weapon was an external instrument, and the name was a dignified title. They were all expressions of supreme power. And in the field of weaponsmithing, only the most outstanding weapons could be called famous weapons. They could often be passed down through the ages, and symbolized the highest achievement of a weaponsmith. Since the Lien clan had established South Distant City, only 3 famous weapons had been produced from the sword furnace, including the knife furnace and spear furnace. The Lien clan only left these 3 ancient furnaces, and other weapons not made by ancient furnaces. In hundreds of years, only 12 famous weapons had been produced. Just these 12 famous weapons had allowed the Lien clan to become one of the 5 holy lands of weaponsmithing. And now, the 3rd famous weapon of the sword furnace had appeared, and the Lien clan's 13th famous weapon. The entire city was in an uproar. Just after the famous weapon was born and the sword formation hummed, Lien Ke suddenly laughed out loud, incomparably carefree. His essence, energy, and spirit were extremely condensed at this moment. His entire body was like a furnace, and his imposing aura was bursting out. On the other side, the flames of the sword furnace had also risen, as if they were resonating with him. Behind him, a door appeared in the void. It was the Heaven and Earth sect. Outsiders could only vaguely see this. Most of the time, the specific appearance of the Heaven and Earth gate was only visible to the person in question. At this moment, the door opened with a bang. Yuan Qi surged violently, as if it was burning. It was as if there was an inextinguishable furnace in Lien Kei's body. He had actually used the opportunity of forging a masterpiece to push open the door to heaven and earth. Jiang Wang could faintly hear the roar of a dragon. Lien Kei had already crossed the barrier of heaven and earth. His Dao veins were like a dragon, and the dragon had entered the sea of torso. The human body had 4 seas, and the spine sea was the first sea. When the Dao meridians and the spine sea overlapped, the first sea was called the Heavenly Palace. Of course, Heavenspan Palace would leave with a soaring dragon and swim into the second ocean. The Torso Sea was the second sea, also known as the 5 Viscera Palace. This realm was called the Soaring Dragon Realm. When a cultivator reached this realm, they were like a divine dragon soaring into the abyss. After all, people like Wang Yiwu, who was so strong that he felt that the Heaven and Earth gate was too weak, were outliers. Generally speaking, the stronger one was, the harder it was to open the Heaven and Earth gate. Lien Kei thought that he still needed 2 more years of polishing, but he did not expect to succeed in one day. Just like how he only wanted to forge a sword for Jiang Wang with all his strength, he did not want to owe anyone anything. He did not expect that he would be able to forge a masterpiece. Lien Kei had not only sacrificed everything for this Sauvignon longing, but also completely embodied Jiang Wang's spirit. Lien Kei looked at the Sauvignon longing in Jiang Wang's hand, and then looked at Jiang Wang. He said, "No matter what happens later, don't be surprised. It's all normal." Before Jiang Wang could understand what he meant, Lien Kei had already formed a seal and opened the sword formation. When they came in earlier, they had only opened a small path. But now, Lien Kei had opened the entire sword formation. Although the swords were like a forest, they could no longer block the line of sight. Therefore, the entire sword furnace, including Lien Kei and Jiang Wang in front of it, was instantly exposed to the numerous gazes. "Lien Kei! Young Master Lien Kei! Brother Lien Kei! Over here! Kei-er, it's Kei-er. You're promising, very promising." Nanyao City was a city of weaponsmith. The birth of a masterpiece was the biggest event in the entire city. Except for those who could not leave, almost everyone gathered near the Lien family. Even if they could not see the masterpiece, they still wanted to share this good fortune. And those who were qualified to surround the sword furnace were naturally the Lien family members. As far as the eye could see, there were heads everywhere. All they heard were praises. It was as if the mockery and ridicule that Lien Kei had received in the family was just a broken dream. Lien Kei, with the momentum of the soaring dragon in his Dao vein and the might of the famous sword, cupped his hands in salute. He was straightforward and not good with words, but he could not help but feel happy that he could hold his head high. After this period of interaction, Jiang Wang had a better understanding of Lien Quebec. This guy's position in the Lien family was similar to Chung Gongxing's position in the Main family. They were both direct descendants of the Main family, but they were not the first in line to succeed. Compared to Chung Gongxing, Lien Kei did not have much ambition. He was only obsessed with weaponsmithing and was not interested in other things, so his life was more relaxed. But there were some things that others would not be at ease with him just because he did not want to fight for it. For example, he went to the Heavenly Palace mystic realm purely to seek a breakthrough, but after he failed, he immediately fell into a predicament of public opinion. But now that he had forged the longing sword, his position was basically consolidated. If he really wanted to take the position of the patriarch, his chances would increase greatly. With his character, it was hard to predict whether it would be a blessing or a curse. The crowd made way at this moment, and a tall old man with a red face walked out of the crowd, followed by a group of people. Lien Ke bowed and said, "Patriarch." As Lien Ke's friend, Jiang Wang also bowed politely. "Good, good. Little Ke is promising." The current patriarch of the Lien family, Lien Zhuping, praised loudly, then turned to Jiang Wang. Of course, most of his attention was on the longing sword in Jiang Wang's hand. "This is your friend Jiang Wang, right?" Without waiting for Jiang Wang to reply, he praised again, "Good. Remarkable power in the future, young hero. It's not a disgrace to this sword." Jiang Wang could only say modestly, "You're too kind. Come, give it to me." Lien Zhuping stretched out his hand. His hand was thick and looked very powerful. "This." Looking at the old man's expression, which looked like he was about to eat the longing sword, Jiang Wang could not help but tighten his grip on the sword. "Don't worry, I'm not stealing your sword." Lien Ke bumped him from the side and reminded him softly, "After the sword is forged, it still needs to be wrapped with a stalk, tied with a tassel, and matched with a sheath. Then, it needs to be worshipped to the ancestors and announced to the heavens. After this, the weaponsmithing ceremony will be complete. At that time, this sword will return to your hands." "Ah, is it so troublesome?" Jiang Wang's face was full of reluctance. In his opinion, he would just take the sword and leave. He would wrap the stalk, tie the tassel, and match the sheath himself. There was no need to waste time here. The old men of the Lien family all looked at the longing sword with strange expressions. "Just hand it over when I tell you to. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Do you think such a conspicuous sword can run away?" This brat had the virtue of a miser. If it weren't for the fact that there were so many people around, Lien Ke really wanted to kick him. An ordinary sword naturally did not need to be so troublesome. However, this was a famous weapon, a weapon that was destined to be spread throughout the world. How could they not make a big fuss about it? Of course, Lien Ke also wanted to let him see what the soaring dragon realm was. Otherwise, he might not have such an opportunity in the future. When Jiang Wang opened the heaven and earth door, he would be able to open the inner palace very quickly by relying on the divine power he had long sensed. Lien Ke had already spoken. Although Jiang Wang was reluctant, he still handed over the longing sword that he did not have time to warm. Although Lien Zhuping looked very old, he was very agile. After taking the longing sword, he turned around and disappeared. No sigh. Jiang Wang was a little anxious. It's okay. He went to the ancestral hall. Lien Ke patted his shoulder comfortingly. "You have to work hard in the future. The future of the longing sword depends on your future." After so many days of getting along, the two of them forged the sword together and were already quite close. Lien Ke's voice was full of anticipation. "I wonder if it will be on the list of famous weapons in the future, and where it will be ranked." Chapter 187. The famous weapons list was a ranking of the world's famous weapons, and only the top 100 were listed. In fact, until now, the famous weapons list did not have a very accurate and convincing ranking. However, because of its influence to a certain extent, it had to have such an existence. Of course, the right to speak was in the hands of the strong countries like Jing, Qin, Chu, and Qi, but the specific ranking was different for each country. The ranking of the famous weapons was not only determined by the weapon itself, but also by the owner. Most of the time, the strong people in the world were there as deterrents, and it was impossible for them to fight to the death. Before they really fought, it was difficult for them to determine who would win and who would lose. When countries ranked the famous weapons list, they would definitely be biased towards the strong people in their country. The only difference was the degree. For example, in Qi's famous weapons list, the first was Jiang Mengxiong's Annihilation Army. It was a pair of brass knuckles, one was Annihilation Army and the other was Annihilation Army. Annihilation Army referred to the destruction of the army and the death of the general. It was said that Jiang Mengxiong used this name to remind himself. It also meant to bring this disaster to the enemy. Most of the Qin and Jing countries were like this. The first-ranked weapon was definitely the strong people in their country. The worst was Chu's famous weapons list, where Chu took up 9 of the top 10 spots. It had no credibility at all. However, it was very popular in their country. Currently, it was widely believed that the famous weapons list of the Jing country was the most fair. However, it was also not recognized by many people. The famous weapons list that Lien Ke mentioned was, of course, the Qi version. The ranking of Qi's famous weapons in the country was quite reliable. The Sauvignon Blanc had just been made, and it was indeed a famous weapon. However, it was only qualified to be on the list. If one wanted to be on the list, it would depend on its owner. For a blacksmith, the final position of the weapon he forged was also where his glory lay. The Sauvignon Blanc was brought to the ancestral hall by the Lien family's leader, Lien Zhuping. 3 days later, the ancestral worship ceremony would be held. During the ceremony, the Lien family would complete the Sauvignon Blanc, tie the tassel, and make the scabbard. During this time, Jiang Wang could only wait at Lien Ke's house. Although the two of them did not remember what happened in the Heaven's Secret Land, they had become true friends because of their similar personalities and the fact that they forged the Sauvignon Blanc. Jiang Wang also learned from Lien Ke why Madame Lien had made such a big fuss about Chang Xiangxi. That was because in the past 50 years, the Lien family had never produced another famous weapon. Among the 5 great weapon-forging holy lands in the world, the Lien family was ranked last. In fact, it was on the verge of falling out of the holy land of weaponsmith. The birth of Sauvignon Blanc solidified this position. Jiang Wang had originally thought that it was natural for such a holy land for weaponsmiths to forge a famous weapon. However, the birth of the real name device required the right time, place, and people. It was difficult to force it. This time, in order to return the favor, Lien Ke had used up almost everything he had and took out the most precious materials. He was one of the only 10 elite disciples of the Lien family who could control his own life tablet. After many years of accumulation, he had fused them together. During the casting process, they used the ancient furnace that the Lien clan could only use 3 times in their lifetime. The sword furnace that hadn't been extinguished after so many years was the guarantee of quality. During the casting process, the spirit of the sword master and the weapon forge master were the same from the beginning to the end, and they were all infused into the sword. All of these factors eventually led to the creation of longing for everlasting yearning. It was almost impossible to replicate. The Lien family's ancestral worship ceremony this time was extremely popular. People from all over the Qi territory came to participate. Even Zhongshuansheng had eagerly sent people to deliver congratulatory gifts. Sauvignon Blanc was Jiang Wang's subordinate. Jiang Wang was now on his side. The greater the reputation of Sauvignon Blanc, the greater Jiang Wang's reputation, and the more awe-inspiring Cheng Gengxing would be. Many times, fame and fortune were tied together. In the fierce competition between him and Yung Genzuan, there might be people who originally wanted to side with Yung Genzuan, but because of this awe-inspiring reputation, they might side with Cheng Gengxing. When 2 big trees competed for living space, people often couldn't see the intertwined roots underground. They could only see the luxuriant leaves on the surface. Jiang Wang tried to understand these things. Cultivating one's heart in the mortal world was also a kind of cultivation. Fengxian County was northwest of the Qi territory. Zhang Family Town was a small town in Fengxian County. There was a family with the surname Zhang in the town. They lived a respectable life, but that was only in this small town. Hundreds of years ago, the Zhang family was naturally a big family. Not to mention a small town like Zhang family, even in Fengxian County, the Zhang family had the final say. Even in the entire Qi territory, they were powerful. But time passed and the situation changed. The younger generation of the Zhang family withered and slowly declined. The property was scattered again and again, and the power was cut again and again. In the end, they could only return to their ancestral land, to this small town where the Zhang family had lived for generations. The Fengxian Zhang family of Qi territory was only left with this small direct bloodline. As for the neighbors in the town, their bloodline could be traced back to countless generations. It was close to none. In this generation of the Fengxian Zhang family there was Zhang Yong. This child was originally the sole heir of 3 generations. Although his family's situation was not good, they still doted on him very much. They were afraid that he would melt in their mouths or fall out of their hand. However, this child wasn't spoiled. Instead, he knew pity and gratitude. It was just that the elders protected him too much, so he was introverted and shy. The Zhang family had a spot to enter the heaven's secret realm. It was passed down from their ancestors. Now it was close to none. It wasn't that no one in the Zhang family dared to fight for such a precious spot. But after several generations of the most outstanding children went to the heaven's secret realm, they didn't come back alive. This was also one of the reasons why the Zhang family had declined. The heaven's secret realm was so dangerous. Now that the Zhang family only had one son, they naturally didn't dare to try. But what no one expected was that Zhang Yong, who was usually reserved and shy, had his own ideas. He actually left a letter and secretly ran to Heaven's secret city. The old lady of the Zhang family cried until she was blind. Father Zhang sighed all day long, and Mother Zhang washed her face with tears. But it couldn't change the fact that the Zhang family's bloodline might be cut off. But what was even more unexpected was that Zhang Yong actually miraculously became the winner of the Heaven's secret realm. He successfully reserved a spot in the Divine Ability Inner Mansion. As soon as the news of the Heaven's secret realm came out, it spread here. Not only did the officials of the town come to congratulate him, but even the city lord sent people to send congratulatory gift. There was even a letter from the county government praising him. The Zhang family was immediately crowded. The Zhang family members were so happy that they cried. Father Zhang even ambitiously proposed a plan to restore the family's reputation. The entire Zhang family town, and even the entire city, were waiting for Zhang Yong's return. They were waiting for him to return to his hometown in glory. However, just 2 days before Zhang Yong returned, something terrifying happened. The entire Zhang clan was wiped out in one night. The family, including the servants, had a total of 23 people. None of them were spared. Even a chicken and a dog didn't survive. The city sent people to investigate, but they didn't find anything. They didn't know the reason, the process, or the murderer. The only thing they knew was, the Phoenix Spirit Zhang family, which had hundreds of years of history, only had Zhang Yong left. The youth who had amazed everyone and returned to his hometown in glory was still on the road, but he already had no hometown to return to. Chapter 188. The Lien family's ancestral worship ceremony began amidst the clamor. It was a grand occasion that had not been seen in South Distant City for many years. The ceremony was called ancestral worship, but it was actually to announce the Lien family's unshakable status as the Holy Land of Weaponsmith. It was to announce to the world that the Lien family still had the ability to forge masterpieces. As the weaponsmith of Sauvignon Longing, Lien K was the main character today. He knelt on the high platform from beginning to end like a clay puppet, allowing others to dress him up. As a guest, Jiang Wang watched the whole process comfortably. He sat on the high chair and silently admired the expression on Lien K's ugly face. It only took a morning for Lien K to go from being happy to being numb and tired. After an entire morning of tedious ceremonies, the first stage of the ceremony was finally completed. Only then was Lien K allowed to move. As the weaponsmith of Sauvignon Longing, he tied the tassels with his own hands. After everything was done, A member of the Lien family presented the scabbard that was specially made for Sauvignon Longing. Lien Ke returned the sword to the scabbard. Sauvignon Longing was like a dragon swimming in the ocean, letting out a clear cry. The treasured sword was hidden in the scabbard, concealing its strength and biding its time. Lien Zhuping took over Sauvignon Longing and personally placed it on the altar. After praying to the heavens and earth, it was officially the ancestral worship ceremony. Not only was it busy, but it also took a full 4 hours to complete the ceremony. Lien Ke rubbed his legs and got up to invite Sauvignon Longing to Jiang Wang to complete the last stage. At this moment, an announcement came from afar: the 14th prince has arrived. The crowd quickly opened up a path and bowed. Lien Ke frowned and quickened his steps. However, an elder calmly stopped in front of the altar and scolded, "The prince has arrived. Why aren't you welcoming him? Where is your decency?" Lien Ke moved to the left and squeezed forward. "If you want to welcome him, go ahead. The masterpieces are in front of me. I'll finish the ceremony first." "Impudent!" the elder said angrily. "How dare you be so rude after forging a masterpiece by luck? Do you still have the family and the imperial court in your eyes?" No matter how slow Lien Ke was, he knew that something was wrong and did not argue with the elder. He only turned to Lien Zhuping. "Patriarch, is this your idea?" However, Lien Zhuping did not say anything. He bowed and said, "Welcome, 14th Prince." Jiang Wang felt something was not quite right. He was about to go up and ask about the situation when a sedan chair approached the stage. There were 10 sedan bearers in total, and all of them were in the reaching heaven state. The curtain of the palanquin was lifted, and a purple-robed man with gold powder on his face walked out. He must be the 14th son of Emperor Qi, Jiang Weiyong. The people of Qi admired purple, and purple was the most expensive color. Those who wore purple were mostly nobles. He got off the palanquin and ignored the crowd. He only cared about walking up the high platform. His sleeves fluttered in the wind and his steps were calm. He had the bearing of a royal. He walked up the stage and saw the Sauvignon Blanc on the altar. He was delighted. "Good sword. My heart is comforted." As he spoke, he wanted to continue forward. Lien Ke took a step forward and blocked his path. He said in a neither servile nor overbearing tone, "Your Highness, this sword already has a master." Without waiting for the 14th prince to speak, the elder from before grabbed Lien Ke and said, "Is it your turn to speak? In front of the 14th prince, how dare you act so presumptuously?" Lien Ke turned around and punched. The heaven and earth gates opened and a strong wind blew. It was as if a furnace fire was leaping out of his body. "Old bastard Lien Luyue, are you done?" The Lien clan weaponsmith clan was not known for their battle prowess. This clan elder was only at the peak of the soaring dragon realm. The fist and the claw collided, and they were evenly matched. Lien Luyue didn't expect Lien Ke to retaliate. He couldn't hold back his anger and shouted, "How dare you be so rude? Elder, please calm down." Lien Zhuping obviously would not allow the situation to escalate. He immediately stood in the middle and separated Lien Ke and Lien Luyue. At the same time, he scolded Lien Ke, "Behave yourself." "Who's not behaving?" Lien Ke was so angry that his ugly face turned red. "This weapon has nothing to do with you. It is already Jiang Wang's good intention to use it for the sacrifice. What right do you have to decide who it belongs to? Aren't you a member of the Lien family? Aren't your skills the secret of the Lien family? Aren't your forging resources provided by the Lien family? " Isn't your sword furnace the ancient furnace passed down by the Lien family? Lien Zhuping asked sternly. Now you're saying it has nothing to do with the Lien family? From the start, I have been forging for Jiang Wang. From start to finish, Jiang Wang has been involved. A weapon forged by the heavens is limited. This sword belongs to Jiang Wang from the start. Not only does it not belong to you, it doesn't even belong to me. Lien Luyue said coldly. You did promise to forge a weapon for him, but you didn't say which one. Put it aside and focus on forging another one for him. That way you won't be breaking your promise. Lien Ke looked at him in anger. You can say that, but how can you do that? Do you not want the Lien family's face anymore? Pa. Patriarch Lien Zhuping slapped Lien Ke to the ground. Is this something you should say? All right. Jiang Wuyong smiled. I'm just here to see the new weapon of the Qi weapon forging sacred ground. Why are you so agitated? Move aside, let me take a look. Lien Luyue immediately moved aside. Please have a look. Jiang Wuyong walked forward calmly. At this time, a voice came from behind him. You better stop. The voice wasn't loud, but it was extremely hard. And who are you? Jiang Wuyong turned around and looked at Jiang Wang with a playful expression. Not long after the Heavenly Palace secret realm ended, he came for the Sauvignon longing. There was no way he didn't know about Jiang Wang. His question was purely to express his contempt. Even the divine ability Inner Palace wasn't a big shot to the Qi imperial family, let alone a seed of the divine ability Inner Palace. You don't need to know who I am. You only need to know. Jiang Wang stood up and pointed at the Sauvignon longing. That's my sword. On the shelf, the Sauvignon longing suddenly hummed. Jiang Wuyong wasn't angry. Instead, he was happy. He couldn't help but praise. Good sword. It's mine, Jiang Wang added. What's yours? You're stepping on Qi soil. Your body is in Qi. Everything in Qi has the surname Jiang. Jiang Wuyong said calmly. It's the surname Jiang of the Qi imperial family. It's not like you, a bastard who came out of nowhere. Do you deserve the surname Jiang? Everything in Qi has the surname Jiang. Unfortunately, it's not your Jiang. Following this voice, a big fat man entered. His eyes were almost squinted. He seemed to be in a hurry. His clothes were slightly wrinkled. His fat body didn't seem very intimidating. However, as he walked, the crowd made way for him. He looked at the 14th prince with a smile. There was no respect in his expression. You want to represent Qi? Aren't you afraid of being spanked by your brothers and sisters? It was Chung Gongxing. When he was in Linzi, the capital of Qi, he heard that Jiang Wuyong was coming to Nanyao City. Therefore, he immediately put down what he was doing and chased after Jiang Wuyong. Finally, he arrived at Nanyao City in time to support Jiang Wang. Before he spoke, he had secretly communicated with Jiang Wang. Therefore, as soon as he finished speaking, Jiang Wang cooperated and asked, "This is the 14th prince. How dare you talk to him like this?" Chung Gongxing put his hand over his mouth and leaned closer to Jiang Wang. He pretended to whisper, "The imperial family is noble. However, our king has 9 daughters and 17 sons. Other than the crown prince, the most outstanding ones are the 3rd princess, the 9th prince, and the 11th prince. However, there's no place for the 14th prince. But I'm different. The whole Zhonggenjia is now between me and Yonggenzuan. I'm half a Zhonggenjia. However, he's only a prince. Although the imperial family is noble, there's only one person. This person doesn't even have a single hair. Why should I be afraid of him?" He pretended to whisper, but his voice was so clear that everyone could hear him. Jiang Wuyong's face, which was covered with gold powder, was also livid with anger. However, what Chung Gongxing said was the truth. At least, it was true when it came to Jiang Wuyong. The battle for the throne was fierce. With his strength, how could he dare to admit that he wanted to represent Qi? Fortunately, as a prince, he had no lack of loyal servants to protect him. "This is my Lien family's sword." Lien family's elder, Lien Luyue, said, "The 14th prince doesn't just want to play with it. Even if you want to collect it, my Lien family is loyal to the imperial family. How can we refuse?" At this time, Lien Ke had climbed up from the ground. The anger in his eyes hadn't disappeared. At this time, the anger was so real that it almost burned out of his eyes. He cut his palm with his fingers and raised his bleeding left hand. He said loudly, "I swear on my honor as a swordsmith. This Sauvignon longsword is Jiang Wang's sword. It has nothing to do with me or the Lien family. The Lien family has no right to decide who it belongs to." Lien Liu scolded, "The patriarch is still here. The Lien family doesn't need you to say anything. Back off obediently." "Ha ha ha," Chung Gongxing sneered. At that time, Jiang Wang didn't listen to his advice. He didn't want to maximize the benefits and insisted on returning the life tablet. He couldn't say anything. In the end, Lien Ke forged a famous weapon and everyone was happy. However, the Lien family stirred up a lot of trouble, holding an ancestral worship ceremony, and then presenting a sword without any rhyme or reason. These guys with the surname Lien were getting worse and worse. Chung Gongxing couldn't stand it. At this time, he didn't show any mercy and said coldly, "There's no need to act here. No matter how the Lien family acts, I just want everyone to remember one thing. Whoever dares to snatch Jiang Wang's things, I, Chung Gongxing, will go all out and slap his face." As one of the successors of the Chongxian family, Chung Gongxing's words carried a lot of weight. "I didn't act with them," Lien Ke suddenly shouted with an indescribable grief and indignation. He stood on the high platform and looked around. He saw the confusion of the Lien family members and the anger of the Lien family elders. What he saw was the ridicule of the outsiders and the disdain of people like Zhong Xiansheng. Yes, how could he not know? Everyone would think so. As the only blacksmith in the Lien family to forge famous weapons in the past 50 years, he was also the one who forged the Sauvignon longsword. How could he not know that the Lien family wanted to offer the sword to Jiang Weiyong? Everyone would think so. Just like in the beginning, everyone thought that he had survived the Heaven's secret realm by wagging his tail and begging for mercy. No one would listen to his explanation. No one would believe him. All the despicableness, treachery, and shamelessness that should be attributed to the Lien family were also attributed to him. At this moment, no one knew what he was thinking. They could only see, widen their eyes and see. Lien Ke looked around with grief and indignation. In the end, he only looked at Jiang Wang and said, Brother Jiang, I can't be humiliated like this. I don't have the face to see you humiliated." He actually hit his own head with a backhand palm. Chapter 189. What was integrity? Some people would rather die than submit. What was reputation? Some people were willing to sacrifice their lives. In this world, there were always some people who insisted on some seemingly inexplicable things. Others could not understand or see through them. However, it was precisely these inexplicable insistence that proved why people were human and why they stood in this world. Heaven and earth sinned me, and all living beings hated me. What should I do? Words were useless, and arguments were useless. There was a kind of person who would not be humiliated. Lien Ke, the creator of the famous weapon Yearning. With this famous weapon, he had become the most dazzling genius of the Lien family, the most eye-catching weaponsmith. He had just opened the door to heaven and earth not long ago, and his future was promising. Today, South Distant City was packed to the brim with distinguished guests, and VIPs were as numerous as clouds. All of them came for his works. His brilliance had just begun, and he was determined to kill himself and destroy everything with his own hands. Just to prove his own morals and reputation. He was so unyielding. Lien Ke's body was roaring like a furnace, and his palm was scarlet red. It was as if he had used all his strength and was seeking death without holding back. Ke, you can't do this. Lien Zhuping was both shocked and furious. Lien Luyue was also shocked, speechless. The Lien family's reputation had been declining in recent years, and they urgently needed external support. In the eyes of the Lien family's higher-ups, The 14th Prince Jiang Wuyong was a very good partner. Firstly, his imperial status could help the Lien family solve many problems. Secondly, Jiang Wuyong himself was not strong enough, and the Lien family had the basis to cooperate with him on an equal footing. As long as they forced Lien Ke to nod, this matter would not affect the Lien family. After all, as Lien Zhuping said, Lien Ke had agreed to forge a sword for Jiang Wang, but he did not say what kind of sword. How could outsiders know what happened in the sword furnace, and how the sword was forged? It was just that Lien Ke had broken his promise, and it was insignificant. They had thought that for the family, sacrificing a little bit of one's reputation was insignificant. They had thought that for the family's reputation, even if Lien Ke was unyielding, he would know what to do. They had thought that Lien Ke would at most throw a tantrum for a while. In the end, he would understand what the best choice was. They had not thought that things would turn out like this. They had not thought that Lien Ke would be so decisive. They could not bear the infamy of forcing the family's genius weaponsmith to his death. After they died, they would not be able to face their ancestors. This palm strike had happened so suddenly that almost no one had expected it. Thus, no one was able to react in time. Except for Jiang Wang. When Lien Ke spoke, he already had a bad feeling. At first, he thought that Lien Ke was going to make a move and turn against his family, so he secretly prepared a helper. However, he did not expect to use it at this moment. Lien Ke pressed his palm against his own head. The crimson palm was scorching hot and explosive, but it suddenly paused for a moment. Wu Qi surged within his body, locking him in place. This was Jiang Wang's second instant cast Dao technique, Binding Tiger. At this moment, Jiang Wang had already rushed in front of Lien Ke and grabbed his wrist. "Brother Lien Ke, you don't have to do this. I believe you." Yes, Ke, please reconsider. Everything can be discussed," Lien Zhuping said. Buzz, the temperature of Lien Ke's palm was too high. Jiang Wang grabbed it in a hurry and was not prepared. His hand was scalded and blistered. However, other than raising his eyebrows, he did not relax his grip. Lien Ke was already determined to die, so he was suddenly stopped and did not have the time to react. When he heard the sound, he was shocked and hurriedly dispersed his force. Looking at the blisters on Jiang Wang's hand, Lien Ke felt even more apologetic. Brother Jiang, Jiang Wang interrupted him. "This has nothing to do with you. I'm not a foolish person." He turned around and looked at Jiang Wuyong. 14th Prince, I think anyone with a discerning eye can see who this sword belongs to. Lien Ke's reputation is no longer in doubt. As a member of the royal family, do you still want to continue your act of seizing? What a joke! Of course, Jiang Wuyong would not stop here. Even if he did not want to make a big deal out of this, he was already in a difficult situation. As soon as Cheng Gongxing showed up, he left with his tail between his legs. What would others think if this spread out? He could not slap his own face and help Cheng Gongxing's prestige. All the treasures in the world belong to the virtuous. Do you, Jiang Wang, deserve this famous weapon? Jiang Wang raised his eyebrows and asked, "What is virtuous?" Jiang Wuyong took a step forward, his purple robe fluttering. "Prestige is virtue." The 10 reaching heaven state sedan bearers who came with him jumped onto the platform. A middle-aged man with a pale face who had been silent beside him flicked his sleeves. Instantly, his momentum soared. He was obviously a strong man of the inner mansion state. Although Jiang Wang had remarkable power, he was only in the reaching heaven state after all. Jiang Wuyong knew that after Lien Ke made such a scene, the higher-ups of the Lien family would not flatter him in public. Otherwise, the spit of the Lien family's own people would be enough to drown them. At this point, he could only use his power to suppress others. Although it did not sound good to use his power to suppress others, it was better than being disgraced. As a prince, as long as he still had the slightest desire for the throne, he could be overbearing, but he could not be weak. He could not disgrace the royal family. As for Jiang Weiyong's attitude, Chung Gongxing stood beside Jiang Wang without hesitation and gave an extremely tough response. Following his movement, a short and fat old man seemed to appear on the platform out of thin air. He did not have any momentum. He just looked at the pale middle-aged man with a smile. "Eunuch, you and I don't have to interfere in the conflict between the younger generation, right?" The strong man of the inner mansion state behind Jiang Weiyong immediately folded his arms and lowered his eyes. He did not even say a word. Chung Gongxing could compete with Yonggenzuan for the position of the head of the family. Naturally, he had the support of strong men behind him. The short and fat old man who stood out now was enough to suppress the head eunuch beside Jiang Weiyong. At the same time, people kept walking up the platform, one after another. There were 10 of them, and they all happened to be in the reaching heaven state. It should be known that before entering the heaven's secret territory, Chung Gongxing was short of manpower. He could not even find a second strong man in the reaching heaven state who could put his life on the line. But after coming out victorious from the heaven's secret territory, in such a short period of time, his force had almost taken shape. This was not something that could be done overnight. He had been preparing for a long time. He was just waiting for that one dangerous gamble. With his magical power, he could immediately turn the wind and clouds into a dragon. Chung Gongxing made it clear that he wanted to slap Jiang Weiyong in the face today. He not only expressed his unreserved support for Jiang Wang, but also used this powerless prince to announce Chung Gongxing's current position. He wanted more people to open their eyes and stand in line. If he had sent more and stronger people to swarm Jiang Weiyong, it would not have been as scary as it was now. It was precisely because no matter what Jiang Weiyong did, he just happened to have the upper hand and slap Jiang Weiyong in the face. That was why people could not see through him and felt that he was unfathomable. He could survive in the cracks between those terrifying brothers and sisters and even reach into the Lien family. Jiang Weiyong was not a useless person. It was just that he had underestimated Chung Gongxing's support for Jiang Wang and Chung Gongxing's strength. At the same time, he had also underestimated Lien Kei's determination to defend his reputation. "I heard that you, Jiang Wang, are also the winner of the Heaven's Secret Territory. Our Diqi claims that those who dare to enter the Heaven's Secret Territory are the strongest under the Soaring Dragon state." Jiang Weiyong's expression did not change, as if he had completely ignored the hostility of the people present. It seemed that he had never planned to swarm Jiang Weiyong and suppress him with his strength. He stood with his hands behind his back and said proudly, "It just so happens that I haven't opened the heaven and earth gate yet. Do you dare to test a few moves with me and see who the famous weapon suits better?" Chapter 190. Jiang Weiyong came to the Lien family this time because he loved the famous sword. But there was a deeper reason. At his level, he couldn't just do things based on his likes and dislikes. In order to declare his status, the Lien family held a grand ancestral worship ceremony. The two most eye-catching things in Qi's territory during this period were the Tianfu secret realm in Linhai Commandery and the Lien family's ancestral worship ceremony. Jiang Weiyong wanted to take advantage of this ceremony to promote his political stance and show part of his foundation. He had been preparing for cooperation with the Lien family for a long time. For him, a weaponsmith family like the Lien family was also a good partner. Holding the Qiyang Commandery was equivalent to holding weapons and armor. Therefore, Emperor Qi would never allow Qiyang Commandery to completely rely on any prince or princess. Before the warning line, the support of the Lien family was limited. This was also the reason why the crown prince and the third princess didn't have any ideas about the Lien family. They didn't get much and would get into trouble for nothing. But for Jiang Weiyong, this was already a rare fat meat outside the fingers of his brothers and sisters. First of all, his own power was very weak. To put it bluntly, even if he cooperated with the Lien family, it wouldn't arouse Emperor Qi's vigilance. And although the Lien family couldn't be completely under his control, he didn't dare to have such deep control. But a part of the resources would be enough for him to reach out to the military ministry and ask for strong support later. This was his purpose. From another point of view, as the famous weapon that established the Lien family's position as the Holy Land of weaponsmiths, the fame of the newly cast famous sword like Sauvignon would belong to whoever got it. For a weak prince like Jiang Weiyong, it could not only increase his fame but also not be feared by the crown prince. It was very in line with his development plan. Targeting Jiang Wang was just a convenient way to get rid of him. But then again, Jiang Wang, who appeared in the Tianfu secret realm and the ancestral worship ceremony at the same time, was a good foundation for him to set his foot on. First of all, Jiang Wang had no background and was just a foreigner invited by Cheng Gengsheng. He didn't know which small country he came from, so there was nothing to be afraid of. Second of all, through the Tianfu secret realm and the famous weapon casting this time, he also had some fame. It could be used as a stepping stone. Thirdly, Jiang Wang was Cheng Gengsheng's right-hand man. As everyone knew, Cheng Gengsheng was competing with Yonggenzuan for the family seat. In addition to finalizing the cooperation with the Lien family, he came to Nanyang City this time to express his goodwill to Yonggenzuan. Why not? Lien Ke was only a junior of the family, and his words carried no weight. Cheng Gengsheng was far away in Handan. Jiang Weiyong, on the other hand, not only had the support of the senior members of the Lien family, but he also had a grand eunuch of the inner mansion stage with him. Suppressing a mere outsider, Jiang Wang, would not be a surprise. He did not expect Cheng Gengsheng to rush over in such a hurry. What's more, he didn't expect that the other party would be so well prepared and be able to reverse the situation so quickly. It was clear that when he decided to come, he had already planned everything. For Jiang Weiyong, understanding the situation was a very important ability. Seeing that they did not have enough manpower, since ganging up on him didn't work, he immediately changed to a one-on-one duel. Of course, Cheng Gengsheng was unwilling to agree. He had always been the one taking advantage of others. When had he ever been taken advantage of? He sneered, "Sure. Are you going to prove us, or are we going to prove you? Or should we prove it together?" Jiang Weiyong's expression did not change. He said, "Since you don't dare to fight me fairly, then let's forget it." "Then forget it. I don't want to waste any more time with you." This move of using the situation to get out of the situation was very smooth. If he said that Jiang Wang and Cheng Gengsheng were afraid of his combat power and did not dare to fight him alone, he would not lose face. However, Jiang Wang shook his head and chuckled. "Why wouldn't I dare? Brother Jiang." Lien Ke was a little anxious. Okay. Seeing that Jiang Wang had become famous at such a young age, he could not take it. Jiang Weiyong did not give others a chance to interrupt and immediately decided on this matter. "You have some guts and did not disgrace your family name. Come up and fight with me." "But I have a small question," Jiang Wang said doubtfully. "The Sauvignon longsword is my sword. If I lose, you can take it. What if I win? What do I get? Don't tell me it's your back?" He laughed disdainfully and looked around. How can there be such a logic in this world? Don't tell me that the 14th Prince of Deqi only has the ability to gain something without risking anything? The people below the stage looked at him strangely. Jiang Weiyong frowned and said, "What's the point of setting up something that's impossible? Since it's impossible, why don't you dare?" Cheng Gengsheng said coldly, "If you want to snatch the famous weapon, we'll give you a chance because of your status. However, if you want to bet on this table, you have to take out something valuable." Jiang Weiyong looked at him coldly. "What a gambler. Do you think you can win everything just because you won one round in the Heaven's secret realm? Do you really think that Young Genzuan can't do anything to you? You don't have to worry about that. At least I can bet with him at the table. You're just a spectator at the table. What's the point of pointing fingers? Chung Geng-shing said sarcastically, mocking Jiang Wuyong for not even being qualified to compete with the other princes and princesses. He laughed and said aggressively, "If you don't dare to bet on this round, you can go back. Forgive me for not seeing you out." Okay. Jiang Wuyong's face was livid. He looked at Jiang Wang and said, "What do you want?" Chung Geng-shing said, "Jiang Wang, just say the word." Although the 14th prince is a little short on money, the royal family of Deqi has a lot of secret technique. He was clearly helping Jiang Wang to draw a line. Jiang Wang had already planned it in his heart. He immediately said, "I want a low-class fire elemental escape technique and a low-class fire elemental attack technique. I only want secret technique." He was preparing for the battle system after opening the heaven and earth door. Generally speaking, Taoist techniques were 4th class and 12th class. After reaching the A class, each class was more difficult than the previous one. Taoist practitioners in the Soaring Dragon realm usually had A-class low-class Taoist technique. The Inner Mansion realm corresponded to A-class mid-class, and the Outer Building realm corresponded to A-class upper class. Except for the gifted, few people could break through this limit. In Jiang Wang's requirements, both secret techniques and top class were very important screening conditions. Secret techniques meant that this Taoist technique was not widely known, so it would not be riddled with problems. Top class meant that it was the limit of A-class low-class Taoist technique. Before opening the heaven and earth door, with his body's reaction speed and the powerful ability to float in the air brought by the Four Spirits body refining technique, his speed would not be much slower than opponents of the same level. But after reaching the Soaring Dragon realm, cultivators could fly in the sky and burrow into the ground. A powerful escape technique was indispensable. This was the reason why he first asked for an escape technique. Hearing this, Jiang Wuyong looked back at the chief eunuch behind him. After confirming that he had a stock that met the requirements, he turned back to Jiang Wang and said, "You're very careful. You seem to be able to take it back." This prince agrees. Come. At this time, Chung Geng-shing said, A-class low-class Taoist techniques can only be used for a while, but famous artifacts can be used for a lifetime. I'm afraid the value doesn't match, right? But what he said was true. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, Jiang Wuyong could not shamelessly bargain with him. He said with a gloomy face, "I'll add 10,000 primordial stones. If you're not sincere, then forget it." At this moment, in his heart, this fatty must be the most annoying person in the world. Back in Maplewood City, Fang Zihu took out a Dao primordial stone to bribe Jiang Wang. The basic unit of Dao primordial stone was 100 primordial stones. That was to say, one Dao primordial stone stored 100 primordial stones. The value of 10,000 primordial stones was 1,000 Dao primordial stones, which was a huge sum. Enough. Let's start. Chung Geng-shing knew that he could not squeeze any more out of them, so he walked to the side with a smile. His posture was as if he had already won the bet, and his attitude was very annoying. Among the people present, only he had a full understanding of Jiang Wang's strength. If he did not believe that Jiang Wang could win, he would not have allowed this duel to take place at all. Although Jiang Wang was full of confidence, he was not blindly arrogant. Before the duel started, he said to Jiang Wuyong, "Half of what I've learned is swordsmanship. Right now I am unarmed. This Sauvignon longsword may become your spoil of war, but before that, please allow me to use it for a while." Jiang Wuyong could not stop such a reasonable request, nor could he. He said generously, "I'll let you try it for a while. What's wrong with that?" Jiang Wang walked towards the sacrificial racks and finally picked up his sword again. He felt a kind of spiritual calmness, as if his heart, which had been wandering for a long time, had found a place to rest. He sensed so clearly that this was his sword. Holding the sword, he turned around. He faced Jiang Weiyong and said, "Please." At this moment, the high platform had been cleared. The people brought by both sides had left the platform, and the Lian clansmen were also crowded below the platform. The place used for the sacrificial ceremony had become the arena for the two of them. As soon as Jiang Wang finished speaking, Jiang Weiyong was already in front of him. He was extremely fast and pressed down with his palm. His palm was like the mountains and rivers turning upside down, suppressing the world. However, a flame flower appeared and bloomed in front of his palm. This kind of teleportation secret technique before the soaring dragon realm was indeed terrifying, but Jiang Wang had seen it before in countless battles in the great illusionary land. He reacted quickly and mobilized his Tao energy, fighting the attack directly. Jiang Weiyong's palm fell, and the purple robe fluttered. Visually, the purple robe flew higher and bigger, almost covering the sky and the sun, making people's vision dark. The flame flower, the only light in the darkness, was extinguished in a flash. However, at the same time, the wood energy in Jiang Weiyong's body grew and twisted in the opposite direction. Tao technique, tiger binding. With this obstruction, Jiang Wang had already retreated and was about to leave the darkness. Suddenly, the purple energy in Jiang Weiyong's body surged and broke the wood energy's binding. He patted the jade belt on his waist, and a cold light appeared in the darkness. There was a sword wrapped around his waist. This sword was also a famous weapon. It was a soft sword named Beauty's Waist. This sword cut through souls and was best at killing heroes. Once the cold light appeared, it was unavoidable. Feeling the purple energy in Jiang Weiyong's body, Jiang Wang quickly extinguished the rising momentum of the east-rising purple energy sword technique. He realized that the east-rising purple energy sword technique back then might have been a deduction made by the great illusionary land based on Qi's imperial swordsmanship. Using this sword in front of Jiang Weiyong would be courting death. His hand pressed on the sword hilt. The sword hilt was wrapped by Lian Ke himself. It was delicate and stable. Jiang Wang held the sword and the longing for the sword. It was as if he was holding the softest spot in his heart. What was his hometown like now? Where were the people in his hometown now? As a stranger in a foreign land, he could not bear to look back at his hometown. In the bright moon, Jiang Wang pulled out his sword, and a bright moon shone through the darkness. It was like memories and longing. He once looked at it from afar and dreamed about it at night. He had already become different, and the moon could not be round again. This was the sword of the sun, moon, and stars. P.S. Last week's small goal was not achieved. Oh, the average number of subscriptions was 97, and there were still 3 left to break 100. There were only 756 recommendations, and there were more than 200 votes left. This week's small goal was to have an average number of 150 subscriptions and more than 1,000 recommendation vote. If I could achieve it, I would add a chapter to update my small goal. Let's see if there was any effect. Chapter 191. Ding! There was an extremely soft sound. It was audible, but it tore through the darkness. It was as if nothing had happened on the stage. Jiang Wang and Jiang Weiyong stood facing each other, their swords facing each other. The tip of the sword was against the tip of the sword, while the longing sword was against the waist of the beauty. They had only clashed once, and it was so gentle. But a huge wave of air suddenly spread out like a gust of wind. The weaker people below the stage were on the verge of collapse. Jiang Wang and Jiang Weiyong retreated. Jiang Weiyong was shocked. Obviously, he did not expect Jiang Wang to be able to withstand his purple aura blotting out the sun palm and block his imperial swordsmanship of De Qi. But when he retreated, his eyes were already filled with purple aura. The ultimate technique of the imperial family of De Qi was the supreme crepe myrtle middle sky classic. swordsmanship, power, Tao, and eye techniques. It was all-encompassing and powerful. He had almost no shortcomings. This was also why he did not care about the so-called winner of the Heaven's Secret territory. But Jiang Wang only retreated half a body's length before he spat out a mouthful of blood. He forcefully stopped himself from retreating at the cost of his injury. Above his head of white hair, the shadow of thorns appeared. The thorny undergrowth blocked his path. An intense stabbing pain emerged, but Jiang Wang's eyes became clear. Tao technique, crown of thorns. The effect was that the power of the next Tao technique would be increased. He had high expectations of Jiang Wuyong's abilities. When he swung the sword of sun, moon, and stars, he had already prepared for this Tao technique. Of course, he wanted to seize the opportunity by injuring himself. When the crown of thorns appeared, 3 flame flowers bloomed one after another in front of Jiang Wuyong. His purple eyes could clearly sense that the middle flower was more powerful than the rest. The purple light in his eyes settled, and the core of the flame flower was driven away by his elemental energy and dissipated into the air. Then, the beauty's waist flashed and easily cut open the other 2 flame flowers. But in the next moment, his hair stood on end. Because Jiang Wang was coming with his sword. He came from a small city in the distant Zhuang country. He walked out of a dead region that had fallen into the netherworld. An 18-year-old young man, traveling alone, traversing mountains and rivers, tempering his sword and heart. Every day, he gave it his all. Every step was for the sake of becoming stronger. This sword strike traveled for thousands of miles, passing through mountains and rivers. Jiang Wang was Jiang Wang because of everything he had experienced. Sword of mountains and rivers. Jiang Wuyong wanted to avoid the attack, but he realized that he couldn't. This sword was too far away. He tried his best to block with his sword, but the beauty's waist was gently pushed away. This sword was too heavy. It was as if heaven and earth had merged, mountains and rivers toppled, and rivers surged. Jiang Wuyong frantically searched for a solution, searching for those strange techniques in his mind. However, he was frozen in place, unable to move an inch. The tip of Chang Xiangxi's sword was pointed at his forehead. As long as he sent it forward slightly, everything he had would turn into smoke. He had lost. There was no sound on the high platform, and no sound below the high platform. The son of Deqi's royal family, the 14th son of the current emperor, had lost to an opponent of the same level in a duel? Until now, only the disciple of Deqi's military god, Wang Yiwu, had created such a record in public. And his opponent was the even more powerful 9th prince, Jiang Wuxia. But what kind of person was Wang Yiwu? He was called the number 1 in the world by the military god, Jiang Mengxiong. So much so that it was acceptable for him to defeat the royal family's son. How could this Jiang Wang compare to him? The crowd looked at each other, speechless. Lian Luyue's eyes widened in disbelief. Lian Zhuping's expression changed. He suddenly felt that the wonderful cooperation before didn't seem so appropriate. Other than Cheng Gengxing, perhaps no one could have imagined this outcome. Jiang Wang pointed his sword at Jiang Wuyong. The reason why I agreed to fight with you. I just wanted to tell you that the treasures in the world shouldn't belong to the virtuous. These words were just a pretense to take advantage of the situation. Treasures with owners under the heavens should belong to whomever they originally belonged to. You shouldn't define the so-called virtuous. Might is not virtuous. Might is might, virtue is virtue. You used your power to oppress others and steal their love. That's immoral. You took the initiative to provoke them and suffered a crushing defeat. You lost your prestige. Deqi's royal family is noble. But not only do you have no virtue, you also have no prestige. From what I see, you are a disgrace to the Qi family. The sword didn't move, but the words spoke louder than the sword. In order to avoid more humiliation, Jiang Wuyong didn't dare to move. He gritted his teeth and said, "The winner is the king, the loser is the bandit. Whatever you say, it is." Seeing that this person's courage was only SOSO, Jiang Wang smiled faintly and put his sword back into the sheath. You think you deserve to be surnamed Jiang? No matter how humiliated Jiang Weiyong was, off the stage, Zhongshuan Xing had already stretched out his fat hand in front of the pale-faced middle-aged man like a ghost. Hurry up! You must accept your loss. The head eunuch under Jiang Weiyong was expressionless. He took out 2 jade sticks and a box of 10,000 yuan stones and put them in the fat hand that almost hid his face. Chung Gungxing first checked the jade sticks, then opened the box and counted. After careful inspection, he confirmed that there were 10,000 yuan stones of guaranteed quality. He then laughed. You are welcome to bet again next time. Under the strange gazes of the crowd, the sedan bearers lifted the sedan again and hurriedly left with the 14th prince. Jiang Weiyong's expression didn't recover even after they left Nanyao City. He was defeated in public and was called a disgrace to the Qi family. It was a great humiliation, and the series of negative consequences was a huge loss that he had to consider. He was angry and didn't know who to vent his anger on. Now that they were far away from the crowd, Jiang Weiyong finally let go of some of his scruples. He couldn't help but gnash his teeth and say angrily, "If it weren't for father's favoritism, he wouldn't have taught me the 2 strongest parts of the supreme Purple Star Central Canon. Why would I be like this today?" He punched the seat angrily. If I had cultivated just one of them, Jiang Wang would have been destroyed with a flip of my hand. I wouldn't have been humiliated like this. Your Highness, please be quiet, the head eunuch said sternly. Only the Crown Prince can cultivate the 2 parts of the Supreme Purple Star Central Canon. Don't try to bluff me. Jiang Weiyong was even more furious now. Then how did my 3rd sister, 9th brother, 11th brother, and the others cultivate them? The head eunuch said awkwardly. It's just that their mother's family is powerful. Our Jiang dynasty will be destroyed by these relatives sooner or later. As soon as those words were said, the 10 sedan bearers suddenly froze. They subconsciously opened their mouths, and blood gushed out, forming 10 blood threads that flowed into the sedan. Each of the head eunuch's fingers was connected to a blood thread. He clenched his fist, and the blood threads disappeared. The 10 sedan bearers and the sedan collapsed to the ground. The head eunuch didn't move at all in the sedan. However, Jiang Weiyong's face turned awful. Your Highness, the head eunuch said with a deep voice, have you ever thought about what kind of impact these words will have on you if they were to spread? 2 years ago, the 9th prince lost to Wang Yiwu. Given how extreme His Highness usually is, have you ever heard of him losing control like this? A momentary setback isn't scary. In this fight for the throne, are you afraid that you will fall even further behind? Today's humiliation might be an opportunity for you to hold your head high in the future. At the very least, the other princes will let down their guard against you and no longer view you as an opponent. However, if you can't even control your emotions and keep going back on your words, it's best that we leave the capital as soon as possible and live a life of luxury. This way, I won't die on the streets with you one day. At the same time, I'll beg for a way out for the hundreds of people in the palace. Jiang Weiyong closed his eyes tightly. When he opened them once more, he had already calmed down. I understand. Chapter 192. The Lien family's ancestral worship ceremony had caused an uproar. Not only had Jiang Weiyong lost face, but the Lien family had also lost face because of Lien Kei's fierce response. The guests left one after another, and gossip spread. But this was not something Jiang Wang needed to worry about. At the moment, in the most luxurious restaurant in Nanyao City, Jiang Wang was talking to Chung Gungxing. You've offended the 14th prince so badly. Won't it affect you? Jiang Wang asked. He owed Chung Gungxing a big favor this time. Chung Gungxing's gains and losses were his only concern. Of course it will. But overall, the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. Chung Gung-shing analyzed for him carefully. His Majesty has 17 sons and 9 daughters. The eldest son has been deposed and is still imprisoned in the palace. The crown prince is the second son. Besides him, only the third princess, the 9th prince, and the 11th prince are very powerful and qualified to fight for the throne. Clans like our Zhongshuan clan won't get involved in the fight for the throne at all. The losses outweigh the gains. No matter who inherits the throne, he will not treat the Zhonggenjia badly. So I don't need to give face to the other princes and princesses, and my family won't say anything either. If word gets out, it will prove that the Zhonggenjia is only loyal to His Majesty and has no intention to fight for the throne. The fat guy was very proud. He smiled so widely that his eyes narrowed. For us, you've gained a lot of benefits from the bet, and our reputation has risen. Do you know what it means to defeat Jiang Wuyong? It means that you deserve to be one of the strongest in the reaching heaven state. Many people will compare you with Wang Yiwu. And you're my follower. Tell me, how strong should I be? Today, I used all my family's resources to bet on Jiang Wuyong. I want to tell those people that they should reconsider their choice. Chung Gung-shing only mentioned the advantages, but not the disadvantages. But Jiang Wang certainly knew. He listened quietly, then nodded and said, "It's good that you've seriously considered it." With that, he picked up the sword on his knees, got up and walked out. "We'll leave later. Lien Ke asked me to look for him. He has something to tell me." That incomparably ugly blacksmith. Jiang Wang looked at him helplessly, implying that he should not talk about Lien Ke like that. "Also, are you that much stronger? Go. Chung Gung-shing waved his hand nonchalantly. When Jiang Wang walked to the door, he said shyly, "Well, apologize to him for me." Lien Ke was forced to commit suicide to prove his innocence. Although the Lien family was mainly responsible for this, Chung Gung-shing's mockery and ridicule also played a huge role. From the bottom of his heart, he truly respected such a staunch person. Of course, it was impossible for the future head of the Zhonggenjia to apologize personally. Apart from the benefit, as one of the 10 most outstanding youths of the Lien family's younger generation, Lien Ke naturally had his own property in South Distant City. For example, this wine cellar. Jars of strong liquor were placed in the hall, and bowls were ladled out to the guests. There were only a few private rooms on the second floor for receiving guests. These properties, including the wine cellar, were mainly used for domestic consumption. However, it was not much because Lien Ke had never been interested in things like power and wealth. He went to the Heaven's secret realm to become stronger, and to become stronger in order to forge better weapons. That was all. Jiang Wang had originally planned to leave with Chung Gung-shing after driving Jiang Wuyong away. However, Lien Ke had urged him to stay. Moreover, the higher-ups of the Lien family had the intention to mend their relationship with the Chongxian family after their cooperation with Jiang Wuyong had been broken. Thus, they had temporarily stayed. Chung Gung-shing would not put on a fight to the death just because he had a bad impression of these people. He had basically achieved all his goals on this trip to South Distant City, so there was nothing to be angry about. If one wanted to achieve great things, one could not allow one's personal preferences to influence one's decisions. If one did not accept some steps, there would be many others who wanted to help one remove them. Those competitors could not wait for one to fall and bleed. After communicating with Chung Gung-shing, Jiang Wang went to the wine cellar. When he entered the private room, Lien Ke had been waiting for a long time. He was not a meticulous person outside of weapon forging, but he still asked first, "Is your hand okay?" "It's just a small injury." Jiang Wang smiled. His hand was wrapped in a few layers of gauze, so it did not affect his movement. "When you forge weapons, you must have suffered a lot of injuries like this." "Yes." Lien Ke sighed and extended his hand to show Jiang Wang. His hand was full of scars and thick calluses. Jiang Wang's hand also had thick calluses, but they were mainly concentrated on the part where he held the sword and the knuckles. His hand was not as scarred as Lien Kei's. I have a friend. When he was forging weapons a few years ago, he did not control the fire well and the furnace exploded. Because he was too tired, he could not avoid it and lost his eyes. He was not blind. If he was blind, there was still a chance to treat it. Go to East King Valley or other places and spend more money. There will always be a way. Both of his eyes were gone. He was very close to you, right? Ah, yes. He was considered my only friend. Then, how is he now? He could not take the blow and committed suicide that day, Lien Kei said very calmly. The profession of weapon forging was indeed not easy. It was hard, dangerous, and easy to attract covetous eyes. The divine weapons that were forged were usually used by the people who used them. Their names spread far and wide, while the weaponsmiths were mostly unknown to the public. Everyone knew that the owner of the army destroyer was Jiang Mengxiong, but how many people remembered who forged this pair of brass knuckles for him? The situation of weapon forging masters like the Lien family was not bad. They had status and respect, and they did not lack strength. However, most of the people in the world were lowly and ordinary craftsmen who worked hard without complaint. This was also one of the reasons why the upper echelons of the Lien family had immediately given in when Lien Kei went to die. Lien Kei, who had forged the famous weapon Cherished Yearning, could no longer be an insignificant junior to the Lien family. He was one of the important factors in maintaining their status as a weapon-forging Holy Land. Even if they had not thought it through before, they should have thought it through after this incident. Jiang Wang was silent for a moment. Because Lien Kei was not a person who needed consolation. Lien Kei placed his calloused hand on the table and said, "In truth, I asked you to stay because I have something to discuss with you." "Speak," Jiang Wang said. "This matter starts with Lien Xiao. Do you still remember Lien Xiao? That fellow who had mocked and ridiculed Lien Kei in front of the sword furnace?" Jiang Wang nodded. "As I said, he is actually a pitiful person," Lien Kei slowly said. "As for the reason, it is because of the life tablet you returned to me." From Lien Kei's narration, Jiang Wang learned of the Lien family's dusty history. When the Lien family's homeland was destroyed, the Lien family fled and migrated. Because the Lien family's weapon-forging heritage was already quite famous at the time, they were hunted down and betrayed along the way. In order to protect the family, to ensure that the family's weapon-forging secrets were not leaked, to prevent people from defecting to the enemy, at the time, the patriarch of the Lien family decided to forge life tablets for the entire Lien family and give them to the loyal elders of the family to watch over. If there was a betrayal, they would be killed without mercy. These elders did not care about mundane matters, but they controlled the life and death of the family. This rule did indeed protect the Lien family's heritage. At the time, the power of the Lien family was gathered and the Lien family was able to take root in Qi. They built a prosperous southern distant city from nothing and became one of the 5 great weapon-forging Holy Lands. However, hundreds of years had passed, and this temporary emergency plan had become a stale family rule. Every newborn of the Lien family had to forge a life tablet when they were born. Before they had their own will, their life and death were already under the control of others. The earliest elders might have all been loyal to the family, but times had changed. There would always be a few unconvincing elders, and there would always be a few scums who would become arrogant because of this. It was not that many people did not recognize the problem of this rule, but those who had vested interests in power could not let go of the power in their hands. Looking back from now, 100 years ago, there was a talented Lien family descendant. Because he was dissatisfied that his life was in the hands of others, he secretly had a rebellious heart. He had been operating in silence for many years, colluding with all parties and setting up the overall situation. Finally, he attracted all forces to besiege the Lien family. If the Qi Emperor had not wanted to fight a war at that time and urgently needed the Lien family to forge weapons and mobilize the army for protection, in that disaster, the Lien family would have been destroyed. Even so, after the disaster, the Lien family's reputation also plummeted, and there was not a single industry left. The Lien family was rebuilt after the disaster. But even after such a thing, the elders of the Lien family were still unwilling to give up the power of life and death. They were used to being high and mighty, and they had been like this. They suffered from the rules, and slowly they became part of the rules. But since then, the Lien family would choose 10 of the most outstanding descendants in each generation. The family recognized that they had the ability to control their own fate and return their life tablet. Lien Ke was one of them. The way to control a flood was better than blocking it. These 10 people seemed to be a kind of honor, but in essence it was just a way to vent. Why did Lien Zhuping and Lien Luyue think that the personal honor of a descendant was not worth mentioning and did not even consider it? Because in their minds, the descendants of the family had no possibility of defying them. They had never imagined that Lien Ke would go against them. This kind of old and rotten rule had been passed down in the Lien family for too long. It was so long that it seemed innate, so long that very few people felt that it was wrong. And Lien Xiao was one of those Lien family members who could not control their own life tablet. He was the majority of those who could not control their own life and death. He had also worked hard for the sake of those 10 freedom spots. But everyone worked so hard. He was one step behind, and from then on, he lived in a different world from those 10 people. Because he could not control his own life tablet, no matter how hard he tried, he could not obtain it. So, he was especially angry at Lien Ke's action of giving his life tablet to Jiang Wang in the heavens' secret territory. To him, if he could obtain his own life tablet, he would rather die than hand it over. He was not angry at Lien Quebec. He was angry that he could not be free, and even more angry that Lien Ke did not cherish this freedom. By the time he finished speaking, the jar of wine was already empty. Lien Ke turned the jar upside down and shook it. Only 2 drops of wine fell out. He put down the jar and sighed. Being born in the Lien family means being controlled for life. Chapter 193. After listening to Lien Ke's story, Jiang Wang felt a pang in his heart. Everything in the world, as long as it had a soul, longed for freedom. Even a lone wolf would starve to death, and a lone eagle would die from touching a pillar, let alone a human. So, Jiang Wang waited for him to continue. He had a vague idea of what Lien Ke wanted to do. Although I used to think that this kind of rule was rotten and old, I also knew that it was difficult to change the Lien family. A rule formed over hundreds of years is not something that can be easily shaken by anyone. But today, I truly realized that the Lien family is rotten to the core. Honor and faith have all disappeared. Change must be made, no matter how painful the price of change is. Because if this continues, the Lien family will be gone. The flame of the ancient furnace that has lasted for so many years will also be extinguished. Today, I have made up my mind. Lien Ke's ugly face glowed with a determined and holy light. I want to change all of this. What do you want to do? Jiang Wang asked. I didn't want to fight before, but now I want to fight for the position of the Lien family's patriarch. He looked at Jiang Wang and said, Before, I was focused on weaponsmithing and didn't have many friends. So, I want to ask for your help. I know that you are working for Cheng Gengsheng, and that Cheng Gengsheng is fighting with Yonggenzuan for the right of inheritance. I am willing to join you. I only hope that when I want to change the Lien family in the future, you can come and help me. Jiang Wang realized that this was a very solid force. With Lien Ke's reputation as a weaponsmith, he had enough capital to fight for the position of patriarch in a weaponsmith family like the Lien family. The Lien family in southern Yao was a family that even members of the imperial family coveted. If not for Emperor Qi's great prestige and strict rule, the 14th prince would not have had the chance to come into contact with them. Unlike the Battle of Dragons, the risk of the Lien family participating in the internal power struggle of the Zhongenjia was not that great. In other words, if Lien Ke took control of the Lien family, he would be able to use more power and have less scruples in the competition between Cheng Gongxing and Yonggenzuan. To Cheng Gongxing, this was undoubtedly timely help. Having an ally like the Lien family was enough to shorten the distance between him and Yonggenzuan. Of course, the premise of all this was that they could help Lien Ke fulfill his dream. Jiang Wang thought about it and didn't lie. You and I are friends. On my own behalf, I am willing to help you unconditionally. But I can't make the decision for Cheng Gongxing. And I have to tell you that the situation we're facing right now is very difficult. Yonggenzuan was far superior to Cheng Gongxing in terms of personal strength, influence, and connections. He had been the first-in-line successor for a long time, while Cheng Gongxing had only just begun to develop. We may need your help now, but I don't want you to make a rash decision. Jiang Wang, said Lien Ke with a serious expression. Whether it's Yonggenzuan or Cheng Gongxing, I don't trust any of them. So I don't need to think about those things. I only know that you're worthy of my trust. So I'm on your side. I'll help whoever you help. All right, I'll ask Cheng Gongxing. In front of Lien Ke, Jiang Wang took out the sound-returning pendant and sent a message to Cheng Gongxing in the restaurant. He realized that this matter wasn't trivial. Rashly letting Lien Ke and Cheng Gongxing have a private conversation was probably not a good thing. In such an environment like South Distant City, the sound-returning pendant he had prepared for the Heavenly Palace secret realm came in handy. As Jiang Wang said, he could only represent himself. He couldn't and wouldn't make a decision on behalf of Cheng Gongxing. However, when he discussed with Cheng Gongxing, this fatty's decisiveness was beyond Jiang Wang's expectations. I agree to cooperate. Tell this sentence to Iron Boy, I, Cheng Gongxing, will never treat my allies unfairly. If you help me control Zhongenjia today, I'll help you overturn the Lien family tomorrow. Jiang Wang injected his Dao energy and placed the sound-returning pendant in front of Lien Quebec. Lien Ke didn't have any objection to being called Iron Boy. He glanced at Jiang Wang and said, then it's settled. When Cheng Gongxing heard the response, he immediately said to Jiang Wang, it's not convenient to talk about it in detail now. I'll privately establish a secret contact with Iron Boy. Lien Quebec, leave immediately and come to the restaurant to find me. We'll leave the city immediately. Jiang Wang wasn't stupid. It was just that he was limited by his family background and didn't know much about these matters. After hearing Cheng Gongxing's words, he immediately understood. The less people knew about his cooperation with Lien Ke, the more useful it would be in the future. If he made a big fuss about it now, it would only do him more harm than good. A good thing might turn into a bad thing. As the only weaponsmith in the Lien family who had made famous weapons in the past 50 years, Lien Ke had a bright future ahead of him. As long as he was willing to manage it, he would be able to develop it very quickly. In this regard, Cheng Gongxing could secretly provide him with a lot of help. This included Lien Ke's lack of experience in political struggles. However, if he wanted to truly control the Lien family, his opponents were not only the other Lien family descendants who were fighting for the right of inheritance, but also the current vested interests of the Lien family. Those elders and even the Lien family's patriarch, Lien Zhuping. Lien Ke's current status was, of course, of great help to Cheng Gongxing. However, on the other hand, Lien Ke also had a lot of competitors within the Lien family. If Cheng Gongxing openly cooperated with Lien Ke, in a way, it was equivalent to pushing Lien Ke's competitors to Yonggenzuan's side. There was no need to think about whether Yonggenzuan would do this or not. He himself was doing the same thing. Among all of Yungenzuen's allies and various connections, as long as they were competitors with Yungenzuen, Chung Gungxing had contacted them all. Otherwise, how could he have developed his forces so quickly? This kind of cooperation existed in the dark and could be used as one of his trump cards. When he and Yungenzuen met in the future, it might be the deciding factor. The more bargaining chips he had, the more confident he would be when the final result was revealed. Of course, Yungenzuen knew that Lien Ke and Chung Gungxing were like-minded. However, he would never have thought that Lien Ke and Chung Gungxing would reach such a level of cooperation. Through Jiang Wang, Chung Gungxing and Lien Ke had made an alliance agreement where they would spare no effort to help each other. On the contrary, Chung Gungxing wanted to leave immediately. The faster he left, the better. The more people would think that he and Lien Ke hated each other, the better. When he returned to the restaurant, Chung Gungxing's subordinates had already prepared the carriage. Jiang Wang got on the carriage and left immediately. Even though the carriage was huge and luxurious, Chung Gungxing alone took up almost one-third of the space. The clan elder who accompanied Chung Gungxing to Nanyang was sitting opposite Jiang Wang, resting with his eyes closed. Fortunately, he was only slightly plump. Otherwise, Jiang Wang wouldn't know where to squeeze in. Chung Gungxing lifted the curtain of the carriage to observe the situation in Nanyang City. At the same time, he explained to Jiang Wang, "I'm not afraid that he has conditions or requests. If I lose, everything will come to an end. If I win, all the problems will be solved." Jiang Wuyong was right about one thing. You're really a gambler. Chung Gungxing's contradictory nature was very prominent. On one hand, he was cautious. He lifted the curtain and looked outside. In fact, he was also vigilant of the environment. On the other hand, he was a gambler and often made a big bet. When he heard Jiang Wang's words, he just smiled. "I'm not as good as Yungenzuen in every aspect. If I don't have the courage to stake everything on one throw, how can I compete with him?" Hearing this, Chung Gungxing's clan elder opened his eyes and said with a smile, "You're not better than him in courage." Chapter 194. At this time, the carriage had already left Nanyao City. Chung Gungxing put down the curtain and looked at the old man opposite him. He said with a smile, "You don't need to mention that I'm more handsome than Yungenzuen. How can a good man win by his appearance?" The short and fat old man smiled kindly. "It's your face." He turned to look at Jiang Wang and repeated, "It's your face." Jiang Wang nodded in agreement. Chung Gungxing didn't care at all. He took the opportunity to introduce to Jiang Wang, "This is my cousin. Because of my handsome face, he has been doting on me since I was a child. Although he looks so kind now, he was called the Fierce Butcher back then. His fierce name can stop children from crying at night." The Fierce Butcher, Chu Liang, was the younger brother of the current head of the Chongxian family. He was the youngest in his generation. Now, many people might not remember Chongxian Chu Liang. But if the fierce battle of Qi and Xia 30 years ago was mentioned, perhaps everyone would know the name of the Fierce Butcher. That battle was the battle that established Qi's position as the overlord of the eastern region. As a strong challenger of Qi in the eastern region, the state of Great Xia's army was extraordinary. The battle between the two countries lasted for 4 months. In the end, it was Chongxian Chu Liang who led the army to the rear, slaughtered people, cut off food and land, and made the rear of the state of Great Xia chaotic. In that battle, the state of Great Xia, which had been strong for a time and defeated the two regions in the eastern and southern region, was completely destroyed. It had to cede a large part of its territory, abandon many vassal states, and completely retreat to the southern region. If the state of Jing in the central region hadn't intervened to balance the state of Great Xia, the state of Great Xia would have been destroyed. Because of his extremely fierce leading style in that battle, Chongxian Chu Liang was called the Fierce Butcher since then. probably because they were a little fat and had squinting eyes. Among the younger generation, Chung Gungsheng, who had lost his father since childhood, was his favorite. Like Yung Genzuan, Chung Gungsheng was the grandson of the current patriarch, Chongxian Yunhua. They could be considered cousins by blood. However, Chung Gungsheng's father had died early. In this aspect, he was congenitally inferior to Yung Genzuan. However, in the generation of Chung Gungsheng's father, there were almost no outstanding talent. Otherwise, Yung Genzuan and Chung Gungsheng's generation wouldn't have fought over the inheritance of the family head. Yung Genzuan's father was no exception. He still had power and status in the clan, but it was impossible for him to advance any further. However, he had already thought it through. Now, he was wholeheartedly trying to push his son to the top. Most of the elders in the clan had ambiguous attitudes. The only one who clearly supported Chung Gungsheng was this Chongxian Chuliang. In Nanyao City, he forced the inner mansion's stage great eunuch by Jiang Wuyong's side to retreat with a single sentence. It could be seen that although many years had passed, the might of the fierce butcher had not been completely forgotten. "Greetings, senior." Jiang Wang greeted him honestly. He didn't have any direct impression of this short and fat old man's ferocity. He only felt that he was kind and amiable. Chongxian Chuliang was all smiles. He seemed to admire Jiang Wang very much. "Xing'er has a good eye for people. You're not bad. Your swordsmanship has some charm." For an expert like him, some charm was already a good evaluation. Jiang Wang accepted it calmly. It was a rare opportunity to sit in the same carriage with an expert of this level. He took the opportunity to ask about some obstacles in cultivation. Chongxian Chuliang patiently answered all of them, benefiting him greatly. By the time they finished talking about cultivation, the carriage had already moved far away. Chung Gungsheng was going directly to Handan, the capital of Qi, to continue the unfinished business. Jiang Wang thought about it and felt that after his battle with Jiang Wuyong, it wasn't suitable for him to appear in Handan. Even if Jiang Wuyong didn't want to settle old scores, he couldn't help but see him in front of him every day. Therefore, he took the initiative to ask Chung Gungsheng, "Now that I've forged my sword, I need time to practice Dao technique. It's hard for me to break through in a short period of time. It's useless to just sit here. Is there anything I can help with?" He and Chung Gungsheng weren't just followers. With Lien Kei's cooperation, they were bound even tighter. It could be said that they shared honor and disgrace. Chung Gungsheng didn't hold back. Taking Jiang Wang to Handan would be more trouble than help. He thought about it seriously and said, "There is one thing. The Zhonggenjia has a celestial bluestone mine in the Yang country. Occasionally, it produces precious celestial bluestone. When we first obtained this mine, we estimated that there would be 30 years of mining left. But for some reason, after 5 years of mining, it seems to have dried up. The production is dropping rapidly. This is one of the things I'm taking over. If you're interested, you can go to the Yang country on my behalf and see the situation." Qi was a powerful country in the world. Not only did it have a vast territory, but it also had many vassal states. The so-called vassal states were the states that regarded Qi as their sovereign state. Every year, they had to pay tribute. Once Qi went on an expedition, the vassal states had to organize a certain number of troops to accompany them. Correspondingly, Qi had the obligation to protect these states from being invaded by other states. The Yang country was one of Qi's vassal states. The Zhonggenjia was a prominent family in Qi. It was normal for them to have properties in the neighboring states, especially in a vassal state like the Yang country. There must be something fishy about the sudden drop in the production of a mine that had been mined for 30 years. Celestial bluestone was a good material for making artifacts. However, it was only a mineral associated with celestial bluestone. The production was not high. In the past, among the properties that Chung Gungxing took over, the value was not high. But now, with the Lian Ke line, the value was completely different. In Chung Gungxing's eyes, it was no longer a mineral. It was a standardized artifact that had already been formed. That was why he took this matter so seriously and asked Jiang Wang to handle it. Of course, on the other hand, although Jiang Wang's power was not bad, in the internal strife of qi, he was not very useful. His real value was the qualification to enter the inner palace of the god power. It was his future. The best way was to leave after building up his reputation, accumulate power in other places, and then return after fulfilling his potential. Jiang Wang did not think too much and agreed. After all, to him, both Qi and Qi were foreign countries. It did not make a difference where he was. He promised to help Chung Gungxing fight. There was nothing much to say. He just had to do his best. Oh, right. Chung Gungxing suddenly thought of something and said, "You will pass by Fengxian County on your way to Qi. I received news that Fengxian County's Zhang Yong's family was recently exterminated. Didn't you get along well with Zhang Yong? You can go and ask him about it." What he meant was that he wanted Jiang Wang to help recruit him. However, there was no need to say it out loud. Jiang Wang naturally understood. Wiped out. Jiang Wang thought of the shy and introverted young man and frowned. "Did you find out who did it?" Chung Gungxing shook his head. "No." "Okay, I got it." Jiang Wang was deep in thought. Who would bear such a deep grudge against the already declining Fengxian Zhang family? Yet, when Fengxian Zhang had a talent and had a chance to rise again, they did such a terrible thing. On the official road, one of the Zhonggenjia's carriages split off. The wheels rolled and carried Jiang Wang straight to Fengxian County. Chapter 195. This trip to South Distant City could be said to be a fruitful one. 10,000 primeval stones was not only the currency of the extraordinary world, but it could also be used as resources for cultivation and supplies for long battles. Jiang Wuyong had lost 2 low-grade A-grade Dao techniques to him. One of them was a fire-element offensive Dao technique called Erupting Flame Sparrow, while the other was a fire-element escape technique called Flaming Meteor. Although cultivating the 4 spirits body tempering technique allowed him to have a deeper control over the 4 elements of wood, metal, water, and fire, this technique was more focused on refining the body. In terms of control over elemental energy, he had not reached the level of Wang Zhangxiang's innate Wind Sparrow True Spirit, which was not enough for him to master Dao technique. These 2 Dao techniques could only be officially cultivated after reaching the soaring dragon realm. As usual, Jiang Wang entered the great illusionary land and used the Dao development platform to deduce these 2 Dao techniques. This was not to say that his one level of the Dao development platform was enough to optimize such an A-grade Dao technique. Previously, he had tested it with the Binding Tiger, Flame Flower, and Crown of Thorns. For such a high-grade Dao technique, the one level of the Dao development platform had no room for optimization. He mainly wanted to use the Great Illusionary Land Dao development platform to confirm whether these 2 Dao techniques had been tampered with. On the way to Qi, Jiang Wang had experienced the Blessed Land Challenge on the 15th of February. He had fallen from the Blessed Land Tao Mountain to the Blessed Land Huangjing One. This time, he had forged swords in the sword furnace and missed the Blessed Land Challenge on the 15th of March. He had fallen from the Huangjing One to the Lank Mountain, which was ranked 30th among the Blessed Lands. He had only 1,150 points of merit points left every month. Because he had not been matched with many battles during this period, his merit points had been accumulated. He had 5,500 points. He placed the jade lot that had been instantiated in the Great Illusionary Land on the Dao development platform and chose to deduce. After reducing 200 points of merit points, the deduction ended. There was indeed a problem. Jiang Wang picked up the jade lot and looked at it. He had only corrected 2 very inconspicuous seals that could not be seen before. After correcting and verifying it, he immediately understood the problem. If he directly cultivated according to the Tao techniques that Jiang Wuyong had given him, he might make a mistake in a battle. Knowing that he had the great illusionary land, Chung Gung Shing reminded him to choose Tao techniques when he was choosing his wager. Previously, when he tried to perfect the 3 Tao techniques that Chung Gung Shing had helped him find, although the deduction was fruitless, a prompt had appeared in the great illusionary land at that time. Do you want to submit the Tao technique to the Tao development platform to obtain the corresponding contribution points? At that time, although Jiang Wang was very curious about the subsequent changes to the Tao development platform, he didn't choose to submit the 3 Tao techniques because they didn't belong to him. There was no need to hide the 2 Taoist techniques that he won from Jiang Wuyong this time. Although he now knew that the great illusionary land was not a unique place, and others could very well spend effort to deduce the Taoist techniques that he handed in, these 2 Taoist techniques were not unique to him. Jiang Wuyong must have a dungeon as well. Submitting A-grade low-grade Tao technique, explosive flame sparrow. Submitting A-grade low-grade Tao technique, flame meteor. The notifications from the great illusionary land came one after another. The second layer of the Tao development platform has been unsealed. Contribution points data unlocked. What is consumed to move the Tao development platform is named merit. What is required to advance the Tao development platform is named law. What is obtained from winning or losing on the sword discourse platform is merit. What is obtained from the Tao development platform and the deduction of Taoist techniques is law. Jiang Wang turned his head to look at the shadow of the sundial, and saw the words gradually appear on it. Blessed Land 30, Master of Lank Mountain. Dugawudi. Sword Discourse Platform. 7th grade, Reaching Heaven State. Required to advance. Soaring Dragon State. Merit, 5,300 points. Tao Development Platform. 2nd layer. Law, 400 points. Required to advance. 10,000 laws. The main Tao development platform of Lank Mountain is in a sealed state, and can be unsealed by 1,000 laws. Not yet unsealed. He had obtained the great illusionary land for a long time, but today, with Jiang Wuyong's help, he was able to unseal the 2nd layer of the Tao development platform. Merit was the merit of cultivation, and law was the protection of Taoism. After the advancement, the appearance of the Tao development platform did not change much. It was still the same bamboo table and the same jade book. It was just that the bamboo was greener and the white jade was brighter. Under Jiang Wang's gaze, the jade book slowly flipped open. Swordsmanship. East Rising Purple Chi Sword Code, Military School's Cultivation Method. 4 Spirits Body Refining Technique, Tracing Taoist Technique. Remembrance, Taoist Technique. Flame Flower, Taoist Technique. Flame Meteor, Taoist Technique. Explosive Flame Sparrow. The Taoist techniques that he had deduced and the Taoist techniques that he had voluntarily submitted slowly flipped open, and a second page appeared on the jade book. In the middle, there was the East Rising Purple Chi Sword Code. The 4 Spirits Body Refining Technique and Remembrance were all strengthened by consuming energy on the Tao development platform. Although the deduction was recorded by the Tao development platform itself, the contribution that was obtained should not be much. There was no detailed explanation of the great illusionary land. Jiang Wang had interacted with Chung Gung Shing before, but Chung Gung Shing did not know much about the great illusionary land. Different from Jiang Wang, who had inherited Zhuo Guanglia, Chung Gung Shing had been chosen by the great illusionary land. The only thing that Chung Gung Shing was certain of was that the great illusionary land was not the product of some conspiracy, and was definitely beneficial. The reason was very simple. The great illusionary land had such a wide range, and there was no existence that could conceal it from all the experts of the various countries and sections. In other words, although the existence of the Great Illusionary Land had not been made public, it was definitely tacitly approved by the various countries and sections. From this, the core principles of the Great Illusionary Land must be fairness and neutrality. But at the same time, because the Great Illusionary Land was so secretive, everything about the Great Illusionary Land could only be explored by oneself. At most, it would be like Jiang Wang and Cheng Gongxing, who knew each other's identities in the Great Illusionary Land and communicated in private. Considering that the Great Illusionary Land had only given the prompt to submit Taoist techniques when he deduced the binding tiger, this meant that the Tao development platform had very high requirements for Taoist techniques and cultivation method. In order to verify his thoughts, Jiang Wang successively submitted some of the basic Taoist techniques that he had learned in the Taoist Academy, such as the flame blade, wind blade, golden light arrow, and so on. The techniques displayed on the Tao development platform did not change. Jiang Wang then submitted the grafting Taoist technique that he had created on his own, the vine snake wall grafting flower. The Tao development platform added 3 techniques, which were also very common Taoist technique. But because there was a change, there was a gain. Although this gain was better than nothing. Therefore, the Taoist techniques that are submitted to the Tao development platform will not only receive different contributions based on their power, but also their rarity. Jiang Wang sank into deep thought. The reason that the Tao development platform could be promoted based on contributions was clearly to encourage more cultivators to contribute their own secret technique. Actually, when he had fought with Jiang Wuyong, he had already speculated. Because the Purple Qi East Rising Sword and Jiang Wuyong's sword techniques really had the same aura. Presumably, someone had also contributed the sword techniques of the Qi Imperial clan to the Great Illusionary Land. But he did not know if the Sovereign Crepe Myrtle Middle Sky Cannon would be in the Great Illusionary Land. Presumably, it was not possible. Take Jiang Wang himself as an example. He had not submitted the 3 sword techniques that he had created to the Tao development platform to be derived. The Tao development platform of the Great Illusionary Land might be able to derive a sword technique to perfection through the various sword techniques that were as deep as the sea, but that might not be the best sword technique for Jiang Wang. Every person had their own path and their own sword. No matter if it was the sword of sun, moon, stars, or the sword of mountains and rivers, they were all forged and refined from Jiang Wang's own essence. He only needed to continue walking. He had not thought of submitting the 3 sword techniques to the Tao development platform in exchange for contributions and unsealing the Tao development platform as soon as possible. Maybe when he no longer needed the 3 sword techniques, he would consider such a thing. Because this was something that truly belonged to him, and was his strongest move at the moment. Because of Zhuo Guanglia's legacy, Jiang Wang had a much easier time promoting the Tao development platform. He only needed 1/10 of the techniques to unlock it, and Jiang Wang had only just unlocked the second layer. It was hard to imagine how many resources Zhuo Guanglia had invested in the Great Illusionary Land. He had piled the Tao development platform up to the 19th layer. What kind of astronomical figure was that? But when he thought of Zhuo Guanglia's world-renowned original Tao techniques, the flame flower burning city, the prairie fire, the sun explosion, everything seemed reasonable. Such a person, such a Tianjiao, he was like a shooting star burning through the sky, and the light he left behind still shone on Jiang Wang. P.S. A technique is the technique of cultivation, a technique is the technique of protecting the Tao. Actually, in terms of points, using the traditional numerals 1, 2, 3, and 4 would be the most suitable for the ancient rhyme and the temperament of the story. But the author was worried that some readers would not recognize the traditional numerals. Considering the problem of the reading threshold, he later changed it all to numerals. But there were also readers who said that 12,345's method was too inconsistent. So he compromised and used the simplified numerals 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Chapter 196. Looking at his 5,300 merit points, Jiang Wang was quite satisfied. When he reached the Yang country and the situation calmed down, he might try to get a place in the Reaching Heaven State matching battle in the Great Illusionary Land. He barely made it into the top 100 in the Wandering Pulse State and the Sky Cycle State. He really wanted to see the top 10 or even the top 10. Not long after he left the Great Illusionary Land, Jiang Wang felt something. He reached out and grabbed a crane outside the window. The letter he sent to the Yun country didn't arrive until now. The Zhonggenjia's coachman was well trained. He drove the carriage silently without looking sideways. There were 2 letters. Jiang Wang opened Jiang Ainan's letter first. The letter was still long-winded, talking about life and cultivation. She was still practicing martial arts to strengthen her body, but it was said that her sister Yi Qingyu had already prepared a very good meridian unblocking pill for her. Jiang Wang touched his newly obtained 10,000 prenatal stones. He didn't know if he could afford it, and whether the Cloud Tower would accept the compensation of the secret Taoist technique. Apart from that, the most common sentence in the letter was, "I miss you so much. I ate delicious food today. I miss you so much. A few days ago, Sister Qingyu took me to the Yun River to play. The Yun River is so beautiful. I miss you so much. Practicing calligraphy is so tiring. I miss you so much." No matter what she said, she always ended it with, "I miss you so much." At the end of the letter, she wrote 3 sentences in a row. "I miss you so much. I miss you so much. I miss you so much." Jiang Wang's face was full of smiles. He felt warm and sweet in his heart. Then, he felt a little sour. He still couldn't pick up his sister. "Jiang Wang, you have to work harder." He gently rubbed the corners of his eyes and saw the signature, Hero Jiang on the cloud, and an under the maple leaf. He couldn't help laughing. Presumably, the little girl had been thinking about this signature for a long time. She was really knowledgeable. Yi Qingyu's reply was much simpler. It was mainly in response to his previous letter. If the Yun country didn't raise ferocious beasts, then where would the meridian unblocking pills come from? "Yi Qingyu, we'll pay for it." Jiang Wang. He was thinking about the country's system, not the answer to this invisible flaunting of wealth. With the richness of the Yun nation, this was obviously not an unbearable expenditure. But not every country was so rich. The carriage entered Fengxian County. There was no need for Jiang Wang to waste any effort. Chongshuan's coachman easily found Zhang Yang's residence in Zhang Family Town. It had to be said that a prestigious clan like the Chongxian clan had a lot of resources. Such a capable coachman had lived in the Zhongshuan family for many generations. He was loyal and knew the geography of the state of Qi. He was decent in his dealings with people. He wasn't someone that could be nurtured by an ordinary family. At this time, dusk had fallen, and the gate of the Zhang family was tightly shut. Ever since Zhang Yong came back, too many people came to visit her, so the neighbors were no longer surprised. He casually sized up the carriage for a moment before turning his gaze away. Jiang Wang asked the coachman to stop the carriage. He stepped out of the carriage and personally knocked on the door knocker to show his respect. He waited for a while, but there was no response. There was no sound coming from the courtyard. At this time, a neighbor who was sweeping the floor said, "Young man, stop knocking. Yongwazi is sad now. He doesn't want to see anyone." Jiang Wang thanked this warm-hearted auntie. However, the Zhang family had been wiped out. Since he came to Fengxian County, he couldn't just leave. Not to mention the mission given by Cheng Gengxing. After thinking for a while, he gathered his Tao energy and sent a gentle voice into the courtyard. "Is Zhang Yong home? Jiang Wang from the Tianfu mystic realm is here to visit." After waiting for a while, he heard footsteps. Obviously, the person in the courtyard didn't intend to hide. His voice sounded weak. Creak. The courtyard door opened. Jiang Wang saw a skinny young man. When he saw Zhang Yong again, he looked haggard. However, his eyes didn't have the naive and timid look that he had when he first met him outside the Tianfu mystic realm. He looked at Jiang Wang with hidden vigilance. After all, Jiang Wang could completely understand his emotions after experiencing such a huge change. Brother Zhang, I'm on my way to the Yang country. I happened to pass by Fengxian. I heard about what happened to your residence. My condolences. Has the real culprit been punished? I don't even know who the real culprit is. Zhang Yong stood at the courtyard door for a while. Then, he moved aside and said, "Come in and sit." There was no one in the courtyard. It was almost dead silent. It was said that no one in the Zhang residence was left alive. Now, only Zhang Yong lived here alone. With his remarkable power and promising future, there were naturally many factions that wanted to recruit him. However, Zhang Yong rejected all of them. He just locked himself in the courtyard every day and didn't come out. This was what Jiang Wang had heard before. I won't go in, Jiang Wang said. He realized that Zhang Yong didn't trust him. Or rather, he intentionally expressed this distrust. If he tried to recruit him on behalf of Cheng Gongxing, he would undoubtedly be rejected. It's really urgent in the Yang kingdom. I can't stay too long on the way. Jiang Wang apologized and continued, the real culprit hasn't been found yet. Is it because the government isn't working hard, or is it because the officials are not capable enough? When I left, Cheng Gongxing also asked me to send his regards. After all, we came out of the Tianfu mystic realm together. There are only a few of us left out of the 50 people. We've been through thick and thin together. Zhanggenjia has some cooperation with the local prefectural government. Do you need us to help greet them? Thank you for your concern. However, the prefectural government has already taken this matter seriously. However, the culprit did it very cleanly and didn't leave any clues. Why don't I ask Cheng Gongxing to transfer a few experienced executioners from Zhanggenjia over and see if they can help? No need. Just leave it to the prefectural government. Zhang Yong sighed, his expression dim. The culprit is dead. What's the point of finding the real culprit? After this incident, he seemed to have lost all hope. No matter what, this was Zhang Yong's private matter. As an outsider, Jiang Wang couldn't force him to do anything. Thus, he only said, "My condolences." He took out a piece of paper and handed it to Zhang Yong. This is the contact point of the Zhanggenjia in Fengxian County. If you need any help, feel free to contact us. Zhang Yong took the paper and said softly, "Thank you." Only now did this "thank you" sound a bit more real. Jiang Wang specially came to Fengxian County and said a few words to Zhang Yong at the door before leaving in a hurry. It wasn't that the matter in Yang country was so urgent. It was just that leaving now was the most appropriate distance. If it was far away, it would be meaningless. If it was close, it would make people wary. As one of the victors of the Tianfu mystic realm, Zhang Yong was certainly worth recruiting, but there was no need to rush. With Cheng Gongxing's style, he would probably help Zhang Yong find the culprit first, then go to Zhang Yong's house to face a common enemy. No matter what, he would invest. However, Jiang Wang's style was different. He wasn't in a hurry to bestow favors. He felt that under Zhang Yong's current emotional state, it was enough to maintain their friendship. Plant the seed of trust and let time nurture it. It was hard to say which was better, but everyone's behavior was influenced by their own personality. The carriage drove out of Zhang family town. Jiang Wang closed his eyes and entered the great illusionary realm. He summoned a paper crane and wrote, "If Zhang Yong requests to come, consider it carefully." Chapter 197. When he saw Zhang Yong this time, His temperament had changed drastically. It was normal for him to have such a change after such a sudden change. But he felt that something was wrong. Just like when he saw him outside the heaven's secret realm. Although he appeared reserved and timid, which was very suitable for the descendant of a declining noble family. But he always felt inexplicably uncomfortable. This uncomfortable did not mean that Jiang Wang had any opinions or bad impressions of him. It was just that he had a good impression of Zhang Yong at that time. It was just that he subconsciously felt that it was not appropriate and natural enough. It was just like his state at that time. It was a little disharmonious. At this moment, although the emaciated Zhang Yong was sad, silent, wary, and in pain, Jiang Wang had a very strange feeling that this was the real him. There was no logical reason. It was the most direct feeling. In any case, since he judged that there was no possibility of recruiting Zhang Yong for the time being, Jiang Wang did not continue to waste time here. The Yang Kingdom was located in the northwest of the Qi Kingdom. The driver was good, and the carriage was pulled by fine horses. With the name of the Zhenggenjia, the carriage moved forward smoothly and steadily. Jiang Wang sat in the carriage and closed his eyes to cultivate. Maplewood City. Almost all of his vitality was gone. Only a weak life fire was burning on the body of a withered man. He did not know how much time had passed. Maplewood City seemed to have lost the meaning of time. The only thing that could prove the passage of time was probably behind this person, the endless tombs. He alone had buried everyone. He remembered that this should be the Wang clan's land. Which part of Maplewood City did he not know? How many years had he lived here? Memory was really a torturous thing. Ling He trudged through the ruins. The corrosion of the netherworld aura should have taken his life long ago, but for some reason, he was always hanging on by a breath. That breath was not breath, but a wisp of black and yellow aura that floated in the Tongtian Palace. Ling He did not know that it was the aura of merit that he had brought when he used the scripture of salvation to expiate the dead. Black at the top and yellow at the bottom. It was the color of heaven and earth. He only knew that he was still alive. Since he was still alive, he had to do something and finish something. He was a stubborn and persistent person. It was because of this persistence and perseverance that he never fell too far behind in his cultivation. Ling He couldn't count how many corpses he had buried and how many graves he had piled up. He only walked forward. When he saw the corpses, he buried them in the ground and chanted sutras to help them pass on. And so on and so forth. He walked to the most remote corner of the Wang clan. This was probably where the most neglected clansmen lived. But Ling He wouldn't care about this. He never cared about wealth, status, and beauty. He was what Zhao Ruqing called a good guy. The strange thing was that this place seemed to have the most death. They did not die from an earthly calamity, but from some kind of powerful force. They were killed almost instantly without any resistance. Ling He pursed his dry lips. He began to dig a hole, burying and building tombs along the way. There was a small courtyard in front of him. Unexpectedly, most of the houses had collapsed during the earthly disaster of that scale. Only this small courtyard remained undamaged. But it was cold and cheerless after all. Ling He pushed the door open and walked in. The first thing he saw was the orange cat's rotting corpse. This kind of rotting stench wasn't anything special. He had already gotten used to it. What made him uncomfortable was the orange cat's state of death. It was most likely dismembered by someone. This kind of cruelty made him frown. He thought for a bit, then dug a small hole to bury it and chanted sutras for it. Ling He continued to walk forward. When he entered the bedroom, he saw Wang Zhangxiang's corpse lying on the ground. Because of his cultivation, the corpse had not yet rotted. The expression he saw on Wang Zhangxiang's face was something he had never seen on anyone else's face before. That expression did not seem to be in pain, but rather relief. Ling He didn't think too much about it. He carried Wang Zhangxiang's corpse out of the room, then dug a hole in the courtyard and buried it next to the orange cat. After he was done, he looked around. Under the chair in the courtyard, he found a sutra that had fallen on the ground. It seemed to have been flipped through by someone and dropped in a hurry. The owner of the book probably didn't have time to pick it up. Looking at Wang Zhangxiang's grave, Ling He thought that the owner of this courtyard shouldn't be Wang Zhangxiang, but it must be closely related to him. Ling He walked forward, picked up the sutra and looked at the cover. The cover was probably made by the owner of the sutra himself. It was very detailed. The words written on the cover were, "The Sutra of Expiation." Ling He couldn't help but sit down on the chair and began to read the sutra. He was too tired, but the physical exhaustion wasn't unbearable. What was truly unbearable was the pain in his heart. Every corpse that he buried with his own hands seemed to be telling him that those experiences weren't nightmares. They were things that had truly happened, and things that couldn't be undone. Perhaps the sutra had a way to resolve the helplessness of the soul. The Sutra of Expiation itself didn't have any thaumaturgy, but as a sutra, it was the core sutra of Penglai Island. Its full name should be Supreme Dongxian Spirit Treasure Immeasurable Expiation Sutra. This sutra was said to be the leader of all sutras, the origin of all sutras, the origin of all sutras. Reciting this sutra was said to be able to eliminate natural disasters, protect the emperor, poison the underworld, and save millions of people. Both men and women would be protected, salty enough to live forever. This was a sutra that passed down the Tao. It wasn't the foundation of cultivation, so it wasn't a secret. Of course, it had immeasurable thaumaturgy, but the copy wasn't. Its true value lay in the mysteries of heaven and earth described in the sutra. Those with wisdom might be able to obtain a few things from it. Since ancient times, there was no lack of Taoists, Confucians, and Zen masters who didn't cultivate any thaumaturgy. And for such knowledgeable people, they were able to comprehend the secrets of the sutras, using their great wisdom to obtain great thaumaturgy, reaching the pinnacle of transcendence in one step. It was said that those who could read the Sutra of Expiation were known as Immortal Path Noble Life, Immeasurable Expiation, Open 8 Gates, Fly to the Heavens, Sin Blessings, Forbidden Precepts, Fate and Karma, Universal Enlightenment, Dead Souls Birth Bodies, Living Bodies, Hear the Heavens. Of course, it was only a rumor, no one had seen it for themselves. On the other hand, Penglai Island's original cultivation sutra, the Holy Revered Jade Imperial Sutra, was indeed immeasurable. Along with Mount Yujing's Purple Virtual Revered Sutra, Mount Daluo's Origin Sutra, and Founding Emperor's Last Calamity Sutra, it was one of the strongest cultivation sutras in the world. The special thing about the sutra that Ling He obtained was the annotations of the original owner of the sutra. From what he saw, the original owner should be an old Taoist who lived in the Wang family's territory for some reason. The original owner had a very deep understanding of Taoist sutras. His writing was simple and distant, with a deep sense of Taoism. Ling He didn't agree with some of his ideas, but he had to admit that the original owner made some sense. But the more he flipped, the more he felt a sense of oppression. Maybe, after reading the sutra to a certain extent, he could already foresee today's tragedy? The thought flashed across Ling He's mind. He picked up a dried leaf and used it as a bookmark, brought the sutra with him, and left the small courtyard. It was time to continue the expiation of the dead. He decided to read 2 pages of the sutra every day, to explain his understanding, and to verify it with the annotations. This would be one of the rare interesting things in these difficult days. That is, if he could still survive. Chapter 198. It was different from the Zhuang state. Qi did not set up a separate department to handle transcendent cases. Instead, all cases would be handled by the government. The constables of each region, from normal to transcendent, had different ranks and enjoyed different resources. Their ranks were not determined by their cultivation, but by the number of cases they solved. If they solved 3 cases of the soaring dragon realm, they would be promoted to rank 6 constable. Because all the constables above Transcendent had a green waist tag, which was different from the normal black waist tag, people often called them blue metal constables. Because of this promotion rule, the constables of Qi were usually stronger than normal cultivators of the same realm. Of course, there were also cases where their cultivation was not high enough, but they could solve cases that were beyond their cultivation. Those cases were extremely rare, and usually they had some kind of secret technique that was different from normal people. Lin Yuxi was such a blue metal constable. She was only a rank 6 soaring dragon realm cultivator, but she had solved more than 6 cases involving rank 5 inner mansion realm cultivators. It should be known that cultivators at the inner mansion realm would rarely conceal their crimes even if they committed them. Moreover, they had many ways to destroy the evidence, so it was difficult to find out. In the whole of Qi, there were no more than 20 cases involving inner mansion realm cultivators that had accumulated in the government. If it was not for the fact that her cultivation could not keep up, she would not be a rank 5 constable anymore. At this moment, she was standing in front of a dilapidated courtyard in a small city in the northernmost part of Fengxian County. Behind her was a group of rank 6 blue metal constables, who quickly spread out and surrounded the courtyard. There was also a rank 5 constable with her, who was a rank 5 constable with her. Yes, the famous divine constable Lin Yuxi was a woman. 4 generations, the Lin family had made a living as a constable. After 3 generations, there was only 1 daughter left. Originally, they thought that their ancestral skills would be lost, but Lin Yuxi had surpassed them. Constable Lin, are you sure the culprit is here? The inner mansion constable beside her was a middle-aged man with a dignified face. He could not help but ask, "It has been so many days, if we still can't find the culprit, we will all be in trouble." What they were investigating this time was the extermination of the entire Phoenix Immortal Zhang clan. To be able to invite 2 5th-grade blue metal constables to investigate this case, it was naturally not something that anyone in Fengxian County could do. The person who had truly contributed was the 11th prince, Jiang Wuqi. Although he was young, the way he did things was grand and majestic. He resembled the current emperor the most. The reason he was supervising the case in Fengxian County was not purely to rope in Zhang Yong. They even used that to show the Jiang dynasty's attitude of not forgetting the nobles and officials. His actions were not just to strengthen himself, but also to increase the influence of the entire royal family. Lin Yuxi wore a green headscarf and stood with his hands behind his back, looking like a refreshing young man. Hearing this, he only said, "Has the array disc been set up? Are you sure the battle won't affect the surroundings?" "No problem," she said indifferently, "then let's go in and catch him." As soon as he finished speaking, the middle-aged man no longer hesitated and directly broke through the door with a slash. The entire courtyard, starting from the courtyard door, was split in half. The door was smashed open and smoke and dust rose. Many blue metal constables rushed in. However, all they saw was a single person sitting cross-legged in the dilapidated courtyard. That person's face was filled with scars, making him look hideous and terrifying. His aura was faintly discernible, indicating that he was also an inner palace realm cultivator. However, he just sat there and looked outside the courtyard quietly. "Lin Yuxi, you really live up to your reputation. In the end, I was still found by you all." His voice was also very strange. It was rough and difficult to speak, and his tone was calm. It was impossible to hear his original voice. "Why bother?" Lin Yuxi asked. However, she did not get an answer. Right in front of these blue metal constables, that person suddenly exploded. An inner palace realm cultivator was someone who could rule over an entire city. No matter where he went, he would be a hero of a region. Yet, as soon as he was discovered, he chose to self-destruct. Even though the blue metal constables present were all people who had seen the world, they were still shocked by this. "What's going on?" the stern-looking inner palace realm constables asked. "Keep his body, and bring it to the child of the Zhang family in Fengxian. This case has been closed." Lin Yuxi sighed. "He is the murderer who killed the entire Zhang family in Fengxian." "But," the inner palace realm constables asked, "why?" Lin Yuxi shook his head and turned to leave. "I am only in charge of finding the murderer. As for the story behind this, I can't find the answer." Sun Country, Rizhao Prefecture, Jia City. The celestial bluestone mine controlled by the Zhanggenjia was in this city. Before entering Sun Country, Jiang Wang had already sent the Zhanggenjia's coachman back. He did not want to come to Jia City directly as a messenger of the Zhanggenjia. Other than the superficial piece, he might not be able to see anything else. Sun Country's situation was similar to Zhuang Country's. It was also a place where ferocious beasts roamed freely. There were official roads connecting the various cities in the country, and there were beast-repelling arrays carved on the roads at set intervals. The wilderness was a dangerous place. Jiang Wang stopped in a small mountain in the wilderness. When he was just in the meridian wandering realm, he could move freely among the ferocious beasts. With his current strength, as long as he was not surrounded by a large group of ferocious beasts, he would not be in any danger. The so-called dangerous place was only for normal people. The most eye-catching thing about him was his white hair. As a vassal state of Qi, the Sun Country might be interested in the Tianfu mystic realm. There was a chance that someone would be able to guess his origin from his white hair and understand his intentions. Before he officially started his plan, he had to hide something. Jiang Wang now had a year-nourishing pill that could increase one's lifespan by 1 year and a longevity fruit that could increase one's lifespan by 10 years. The reason why he did not eat them earlier was because he wanted to continue feeling the effects of aging so that he could complete the last sword of the 3 major sword technique. Since he could not avoid aging once, he had to make use of this state. Now that he felt that the sword could be used at any time, he did not need to suppress it anymore. First, he ate the year-nourishing pill. This pill was made by grinding the turtle shell of the country's protector beast into powder. That beast's battle power was close to the truth realm, and its body was full of treasures. The country's protector, Zhao Tsang, must have a better year-nourishing pill, but that had nothing to do with Jiang Wang. The year-nourishing pill did not have any taste, but after swallowing it, there was a warm feeling and it was over in a flash. Jiang Wang then wrapped the longevity fruit in his mouth. The fruit melted in his mouth, refreshing and sweet. It flowed down his throat and into his limbs and bones. He could even clearly feel that his essence, energy, and spirit had been replenished. The increase in power would increase one's lifespan, and with the year-nourishing pill and the longevity fruit, it was replenished. At this time, his lifespan was not much different from before he used the white bone escape technique. Of course, it was a pity that the year-nourishing pill and longevity fruit had no effect on him. At this time, Jiang Wang felt his scalp itch. He brushed his hand across it and wiped away all his white hair. A ball of water condensed in front of him, and Jiang Wang watched as he turned into a handsome little bald head. Then, black hair appeared on his bald head. His black hair grew rapidly until it reached his ears. It was not as long as before, but it could be tied into a Dao bun. Of course, Jiang Wang would not tie it into a Dao bun. He no longer felt a sense of belonging to the Zhuang country or the Dao sect. He casually tied up his hair. At this time, he was wearing ordinary clothes and had a long sword at his waist. He controlled the fluctuations of his Dao essence. He casually walked on the official road, looking no different from an ordinary youth, except for his overly heavy heart. Chapter 199. As the overlord of the Eastern region, Qi's words carried weight in the entire Eastern region. Not only did they occupy the most fertile land in the Eastern region, but they also governed many vassal states and secretly supported many sects on the islands near the sea. However, in the Eastern region, not all powers were willing to give face to the Jiang dynasty. Legalism's Holy Land, Sanqing Palace, and Buddhism's Eastern Holy Land, Xiankong Temple. The fishing tower on the islands near the sea, the East King Valley that cultivated both medicine and poison, these large sects had already formed their own countries. It was just that they had yet to establish a national system. For example, the state of Chu and the state of Zheng, which were located at the border between the northern region and the eastern region, also had complete sovereignty and were self-governing. With the secret support of the Mu state of the north and the overlord of the central region, the Jing state, they really dared to bare their fangs at Qi in recent years. There was a huge canyon between the Chu nation and the East King Valley. It was called the Broken Soul Gorge. The canyon was so long that it even exceeded the length of the East King Valley. It started in the Rhone country in the north of the Yang country and ended in the northern desert. It was said that it was not far from the endless quicksand. It was as if the end of the east was a bottomless sea. At the end of the north was a barren, scorched land. The endless quicksand was the most dangerous place in the desert known to ordinary people. It was precisely because this canyon was so deep, so long, and extended all the way to that mysterious and terrifying place. It was as if he was passing through the netherworld and entering hell. Every passerby who passed by this place felt as if their souls had been shattered. Hence the name. This place had always been deserted. However, right at this moment there were 7 people standing on the precipice of the Death Soul Gorge. It was a cross-section of the cliff. Looking up, it was too high to climb. Looking down, one couldn't see the end. However, these 7 people were as calm as pine trees, their robes fluttering in the wind. A handsome man with eyes like cold stars stood in front of the crowd. He seemed to be the leader. If Jiang Wang were here, he would recognize that this person was Yin Guan, whom he had met in the Yu state. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and his figure was tall and straight. He wore a green robe with a pendant hanging from his waist. His sword-like eyebrows reached his temples, and his temperament was unique. Of these 7 people, the others had either covered their faces with scarves or masks. All of them had made different kinds of concealment. He was the only one who revealed his true appearance and faced the other 6. After escaping from the Yu country, not much time had passed, but Yin Guan obviously didn't waste any time. His aura was more stable and powerful than before. At this moment, he had gathered these 6 people with different auras, but all of them were tyrannical. Of course, it was not to look at the scenery of the Broken Soul Gorge. There was nothing to see here, and no one was willing to look at the scenery. Since we've decided to get together, with your talents, doing anything else would be a waste. Yin Guan faintly spoke, but no matter how strong the wind was, it couldn't cover up his voice. Our path to becoming a powerful organization starts from killing. Then, a hoarse voice asked from across him, "What is the name of our organization? We are all people who have nowhere to go, and even hell won't open the door for us, aren't we?" Yin Guan stood against the wind, his long hair fluttering in the wind. His gaze swept past the heads of these people. It was unknown where he was looking at. Why don't we call it Doorless Hell? The scale of Sunshine County's Jia City was similar to Maplewood City's, or perhaps slightly larger. The local Shi family had been in charge of this city for generations, and it could be said that their roots were firm. The Zhenggenjia's Celestial Stone Mine was in Qingyang Town, which was under Jia City's rule. Qingyang Town's village chief, Hu Yu, could be considered as the person in charge of Chongshuan's affairs in Jia City. Because of this identity, Qingyang Town wasn't actually under Jia City's control. As a vassal state of Qi, Many times, the government of Yang country couldn't be firm. After Jiang Wang learned about the sudden drop in the celestial stone mines production, his first thought was that the problem might be between Jia City and Qingyang Town. The whole of Jia City had a total of 8 towns. When the Zhonggenjia took down the celestial stone mine here, it was in fact eliminating one town. It was impossible that the Shi family didn't have any ideas. Of course, they didn't dare to oppose on the surface, but in the dark, it was very possible that they wanted to cause the mine to dry up and end the Zhonggenjia's business here early. As for Hu Yu of Qingyang Town, he had been in contact with the Zhonggenjia for so long, so he probably didn't have the guts to do anything. Or rather, he wasn't that stupid. As long as the Zhonggenjia was still operating this mine in name, Hu Yu would be the king of Qingyang Town. It was fine if he didn't think of ways to extend the mine's lifespan, but why would he be so stupid as to destroy his own Great Wall? It would be best if things could be simple, but Jiang Wang wasn't too optimistic. As for the truth, he still had to personally investigate to be sure. This was also the reason why he came here in disguise. The celestial stone mine itself was equivalent to a village. There were cultivators guarding it all year round, and it was also protected by a formation. Many miners lived here. There were also official roads connecting the mine and Qingyang Town, but the Zhonggenjia's mine obviously didn't have much protection from the Yang country. The official roads weren't safe enough, and the beast-repelling formation was rarely maintained. It was because of the dangers of the wilderness that the miners here rarely left the mine. Every month, they would be escorted back to town by the cultivators guarding the mine. Jiang Wang came here for the position of a guard of the mine. Whose mine was the name of this celestial stone mine? A few large signs were dangling at the entrance of the mine. The mine guards mainly guarded against vicious beasts, not people. After all, robbers couldn't steal anything from the mine, and they wouldn't go so far as to carry a pile of ore back. Moreover, there were transcendent cultivators guarding this place. If transcendent cultivators robbed here, they would lose more than they could gain, and ordinary bandits would be courting death. Jiang Wang easily found the manager of the mine, and expressed that he wanted to find a stable job. The manager of whose mine was also surnamed Hu, and was related to Hu Yu. The reason Jiang Wang knew about this was because he had already bragged about it 3 times in just a few words. I also know. I'm related to Constable Hu. Being in charge of this mine is a big responsibility. Manager Hu took 2 puffs of his pipe and suddenly asked, "What's your name?" "Duguan, you've learned martial arts." Wandering Pulse Cultivator. Plop. Manager Hu rolled on the ground. He hurriedly got up and clasped Jiang Wang's hand, his face full of humility. "Master Cultivator?" Jiang Wang pulled his hand away without a trace. "What, you don't accept transcendent cultivators here?" The miners of the mine could safely travel to and from Qingyang Town every month by relying on transcendent cultivators. Of course, it was impossible for this place not to accept them. Yes. Manager Hu slapped his thigh, and with the craftiness of a minor character, he stole a glance at Jiang Wang and said, "I'm afraid the conditions are difficult, so I won't take a liking to you." "Tell me about it," Jiang Wang said perfunctorily, sizing him up left and right. Not long after entering this place, he found something interesting. Chapter 200. According to Manager Hu's introduction. In this mine, there were a dozen or so normal guards, all of whom were mortal martial artists. Their role was only to maintain order among the miners. There were many fights in the mine, so there was no choice but to control them. There were 3 transcendent cultivators. There were originally 4, but 1 left a while ago. Jiang Wang had already figured it out before he came, and Manager Hu was worried about it. The conditions in the mine were harsh, and most transcendent cultivators were unwilling to come. It wasn't easy to catch someone like him who volunteered himself, so there was no way he wouldn't take him in. Of course, lowering the price was also a necessary process. 1 Tao primordial stone a month. Manager Hu said and raised a finger. How about it? In the room he was working in, there was a circular hole that was obviously just mended, and it was very crudely mended. Isn't it a bit too little? Jiang Wang purposely put on a troubled expression. It's quite a bit. Caretaker Hu stopped smoking his pipe and started to calculate for Jiang Wang. The few old cultivators who were here earlier could only earn 1.5 primordial stones every month. This Tao primordial stone is not a fixed sum. It's from the Zhonggenjia. Do you know the Zhonggenjia? The one from the Qi constable who is from the Zhonggenjia, that's his family. Jiang Wang purposely moved closer to the hole. This hole isn't small. How did you do it? It wasn't mended. I'll get someone to do it later. Manager Hu avoided the topic and gritted his teeth. Like this, it's only 1.5 a month. How about it? Jiang Wang laughed in his heart. This hole was clearly created by some kind of Tao technique, and it was probably the reason why a cultivator left the mine. Originally, the transcendent cultivators who were willing to come to this kind of mine were all here for the safety. Other than escorting the miners back to town once a month, there was nothing else to do. Under normal circumstances, 2 Tao roaming cultivators were enough to ensure the safety of the official road. After all, Yang country's officials wouldn't allow 2 strong, fierce beasts to approach the settlement. If they had to fight every now and then, it wouldn't be something that could be stopped with just 1.5 primal stones. More than half a year ago, someone had barged in once and fought with the cultivators guarding here. He did not manage to find out the specifics, but the strange thing was that nothing was lost at the Hu's mine. Caretaker Hu did not want to talk about this hole. It was obvious that there was a problem. Jiang Wang was well aware that Zhonggenjia would send 10 Tao origin stones to this mine every month. According to Steward Hu's price, it was enough to hire 6 cultivators. Now that the Hu clan's mine had only invited 4 Meridian Wandering Realm cultivators, most of the Tao essence stones had naturally been embezzled. The heavens were high and the emperor was far away. This was a very common thing. It was not worth Jiang Wang exposing it now. Jiang Wang pretended to hesitate for a moment before saying, "Okay. All right then." Manager Hu was very happy. He shouted to a sturdy young man outside the door, "Xuanzi, go and invite Master Gu over." He smiled apologetically at Jiang Wang and said, "Master Gu is also a cultivator master. Let's try it out and go through the motions. Newcomers to the mine have to go through this process. Please forgive me." Jiang Wang smiled. "I understand." Master Gu was a skinny old man. He wore a black short gown and a pair of cloth shoes. At first glance, he looked like an expert. Probably because he was used to being flattered in the mine, his eyes were always looking up at the sky. "This is the kid?" Master Gu glanced at Jiang Wang and asked Manager Hu. In his opinion, he must be a small cultivator from some fallen sect. Because his cultivation method was crude and his strength was low, he could not survive outside. He could only come to a place like the mine to accumulate some Tao essence stones to assist his cultivation. Although he could only muddle along in this kind of place, he, Master Gu, was old. Alright, being old was not an advantage in the field of extraordinary beings. But he was experienced. They were both weak. He, Master Gu, was weak but experienced. Then he was stronger than those who were weak but not experienced. He was weak to the point of being arrogant. They were both extraordinary cultivators, but he insisted on passing the message through Manager Hu. He was very arrogant. "It's me." Without waiting for Manager Hu to speak, Jiang Wang said directly, "Let's try it out, old man." Master Gu blew his beard and did not say much. His claw came down on Jiang Wang's head. It was just a spar, but he was very ruthless. He always went for the vital points. Jiang Wang forcefully controlled his body's instinctive reaction. That was why he did not end this person's life with one sword. The two of them went back and forth, entangling with each other. At least in Manager Hu's eyes, this spar was extremely exciting. Both sides fought back and forth, making crackling sounds. It was really unfathomable. It left a lasting aftertaste. And in Master Ji's opinion, the younger generation was to be feared. Although this kid's cultivation method was crude, his foundation was still tough. He could actually hold on for so long. If they continued fighting, he would be too tired. If his Tao essence was used up too much, he would need to use Tao essence stones to replenish it. It was not worth it. With this thought, Master Gu lightly brushed his hand, ending the spar. He nodded at Manager Hu. This kid is indeed at the Wandering Meridian realm. If we continue fighting, I will have to use my sect's secret arts. He is still young. It is not good to harm his foundation. Master Ji's words seemed magnanimous, but his raised eyebrows and glared at Jiang Wang. The meaning behind his words was, "Why haven't you thanked me for not killing you?" As a youngster who had just entered the extraordinary realm, Jiang Wang was also very tactful. He cooperated and asked, "May I ask what sect Master Gu comes from?" Sigh. Master Gu sighed deeply. "I originally did not want to mention my sect. That is a sad place for me. When I entered the Greenwood Immortal School, I was the same age as you. How high-spirited! Unfortunately, cough." Jiang Wang interrupted him somewhat embarrassedly. "The Greenwood Immortal School is? You don't even know about the Greenwood Immortal School?" Master Gu looked at Jiang Wang very disdainfully. "Sai, you are too young. You don't know anything. You should know about East King Valley, right?" "I have heard of it. Could it be?" "Yes," Master Gu said grandly. "The Greenwood Immortal School is a subsidiary sect of East King Valley." Jiang Wang almost couldn't breathe. As a renowned medical sect, the East King Valley was located near the state of Qi. When Chung Gung Shing explained the surrounding forces to him, he also mentioned it in detail. At that time, there seemed to be cultivators from East King Valley participating in the Heavenly Palace mystic realm. This Greenwood Immortal School was so famous, and this person surnamed Gu was so arrogant. He thought that it was some amazing place. He was wondering why he hadn't heard Chung Gung Shing mention it, but it turned out that it was just a subsidiary sect of East King Valley. How to describe this level? In analogy, it was equivalent to a Wangjiang City Dao Academy. With Jiang Wang's current strength, apart from the Dean of the Dao Academy and Lin Jingren, he could basically sweep through them. He might even be able to fight Lin Jingren, who had a soaring Dao Meridian. "Like thunder piercing my ears," Jiang Wang said reluctantly. "Everyone will live together for a long time in the future." Manager Hu said at the right time, "Master Dugu, can you arrange a residence for me? Although it's a little small, it's still a private residence. Is that okay?" "Just a residence is enough. I'm not picky. Also, you're so old. Don't call me master. I can't stand it. Just call me Un." Jiang Wang added with a smile, "No matter what, you're from the same family as Constable Hu, aren't you? You're someone with status. Hey, Un. I'll wait here for a while." Manager Hu called out happily. Feeling that his status had been recognized, he ran out happily and personally changed Jiang Wang's bed. Naturally, it was impossible to build a new residence for Jiang Wang. It just so happened that the previous cultivator left and left behind a small courtyard. He could live in it after a little tidying up. He waited until caretaker who was far away. Master Gu said coldly, "Why are you being so polite to a mortal? How can I, a cultivator, be compared to this kind of mortal?" Jiang Wang hated this kind of person who didn't have much strength but thought of himself as extraordinary and regarded everyone else as ants. Originally, He just thought that this old man had no sense of propriety and liked to boast. More than that, he found him interesting. Now, he really did hate him. However, he didn't show it on his face. He just casually found a chair and sat down. Chapter 201. Master Gus said casually, "How many Tao origin stones do you get every month?" Jiang Wang was born in a Taoist school in an orthodox Taoist country, so he hadn't seen the lives of cultivators at the bottom. However, the filthy thoughts of humans were nothing new at any level. Jiang Wang raised his head and glanced at him, but he didn't say anything. Being called master here and there, he really thought he was a master. The old cultivator surnamed Gus stayed for a while. When he saw that Jiang Wang didn't respond, his expression turned ugly, and he left with a wave of his hand. When he spoke, he didn't avoid Xuanzi, who was guarding the door. Xuanzi also nodded and bowed to him as he left, as if he was already used to this kind of status. Jiang Wang closed his eyes and meditated for a while. Then, manager Hu trotted back. Perhaps because he was too excited, he shouted "an" too quickly. The two words merged into one, and he shouted "an." "I've asked someone to make the bed for you. Is it okay for you?" Looking at his wrinkled face, Jiang Wang had goosebumps all over his body, and it took him a long time to calm down. He responded, "Yes." The environment of the mine naturally couldn't be too good, but the Hu family's mine still specially prepared a small courtyard for the cultivators stationed here. As for why there were 4 cultivators but 6 small courtyards, those who knew would naturally understand. As long as Zhenggenjia didn't come to check seriously, these 6 small courtyards would never be full. The cultivators ate and lived separately from the miners, and they rarely interacted with each other. When he walked to the entrance of the small courtyard, a middle-aged man with drooping eyes and an unshaven beard walked over. "Master Xiang." Manager Hu greeted him. The middle-aged man called Master Xiang only raised his hand as a response. He didn't look sideways and walked away, minding his own business. Manager Hu had long been accustomed to his character. As he pushed the door open, he explained, "Master Xiang is like this. He doesn't have a problem with anyone. He's just muddling along." Jiang Wang nodded. The layout of the small courtyard was very ordinary, but it was considered pretty good in a place like the mine. Because it had just been tidied up, it looked clean, bright. Jiang Wang casually looked around and expressed his satisfaction. Manager Hu, on the other hand, was somewhat bashful as he said, "An, I've just arrived and there aren't any maids in the courtyard." Well, she had asked Lord Zhang's maidservant to help her clean the courtyard. "Only when I return to town at the end of the month will I be able to recruit new maids for you." Caretaker Who looked at Jiang Wang and seemed to be too embarrassed to open his mouth. "Why don't we make do with the suppository for the next few days? Lord Zhang should be the 3rd transcendent cultivator of the Hu mine." From Manager Hu's words, he should be someone who was easy to talk to. As for the maids, Jiang Wang silently glanced at the honest-looking Xuanzi. Xuanzi also laughed enthusiastically. Jiang Wang purposely asked, "Why is it that caretaker who has such a high position and is also from the same family as police constable Hu, yet you don't have a maid to serve you?" Yes. Can I transfer it over for you?" As caretaker Hu spoke, he leaned close to Jiang Wang's ear and added in a low voice, "Well, that old woman comes to see you once a month. That guy has very sharp nails." Jiang Wang laughed. All right, caretaker Hu. I'm not that precious and don't need people to serve me at all times. You guys just have to prepare the meals on time." Seeing that he was so easy to talk to, caretaker Hu smiled until his old face twisted together. No matter how he looked at him, he found him pleasing to the eye. But he still said in a very formal manner, "At the end of the month, I'll definitely pick a clever and pleasant one for you." At this moment, Master Ji's voice came from outside the door. I heard that Zhang Hai's maidservant was asked to help clean this courtyard. How can this be? Wouldn't this be neglecting our little brother? He walked into the small courtyard with a fake smile, followed by a woman who lowered her head and followed his footstep. He looked at Jiang Wang with a playful gaze. Previously, there weren't enough maids in my courtyard, so I borrowed some from here. Since you're here, I'll return them to you. You won't have any objections, right? Without waiting for Jiang Wang to speak, he turned to caretaker Hu and said, If you're hiring a new maidservant at the end of the month, it just so happens that my courtyard's maidservant is tired of looking at them. Get me a new one. Caretaker Hu agreed. Understood, Master Go. Jiang Wang now understood why caretaker Hu was so coy before. It turned out that this courtyard originally had a maidservant, but the one surnamed Gu took her away. He didn't dare to offend Master Go, so he could only vaguely let it go. He didn't have any objections to caretaker Hu because of this. He just felt that this old man surnamed Gu was really narrow-minded and disgusting. Jiang Wang didn't care whether the maidservant who took this courtyard would return or not. However, old man Gu deliberately delivered himself to his doorstep, making it clear that he wanted to disgust him. However, Jiang Wang always remembered the purpose of his trip. Before he obtained enough information, he wouldn't expose himself. Therefore, he only smiled. Master Gu is old and needs to be served. I can completely understand. You can also bring this maidservant back. I'm not a cripple, so I have no problem taking care of myself. His expression was gentle, but there were thorns in his softness. You'd better stay. Master Gu said half gloomily, it's the intersection of spring and summer. Be careful not to catch a cold at night. That's not necessary. Jiang Wang subconsciously refused again, but stopped himself, because at this moment, he saw the woman behind Master Gu raise her head. It wasn't that she was an outstanding beauty. Instead, there was a trace of silent pleading in her bruised eyes. That glimmer of bitterness and hope mixed together was really hard to be ruthless enough to extinguish. No wonder she kept her head down, because there were injuries on her face. Then stay. Jiang Wang corrected himself. Did you hear that? Still not getting over? Master Gu frowned. That maidservant took 2 light steps. You can't do anything well. You're walking so slowly. Master Gu picked her up and threw her at Jiang Wang. Even though she was suddenly lifted and thrown out like a weapon, that maidservant didn't dare to scream loudly. She just tightly shut her eyes. However, she didn't feel the pain she expected. Only a gentle force wrapped around her. She seemed to have fallen into cotton. She opened her eyes and saw a young man's face. In addition to his original delicate appearance, there was a trace of determination that was rarely seen at this age. Jiang Wang casually put her down. Then he took a step forward and looked straight at Master Gu. Surnamed Gu, you're too presumptuous. Although he came here for other purposes, he couldn't let others bully him. That kind of forbearance would easily arouse suspicion. Not necessary, not necessary. Come, Master Gu. Seeing that the situation had escalated, Manager Hu hurriedly came up to smooth things over. There's a new bottle of good quality tiger bone wine over there. Do you want to taste it? Master Gu was just angry and deliberately came over to disgust Jiang Wang and show off his seniority. It wasn't that he really wanted to fight to the death with him. The older a person was, the more they cherished their life. The gains wouldn't make up for the losses if things got out of hand. Hearing this, he only snorted. Then let's go and try it. Manager Hu was smooth and slick. While leading the way, he even turned around and said to Jiang Wang, this one is going to rest first. Later on, I'll also send this one a jar. Even after they walked far away, Manager Hu's flattering voice still faintly sounded. This one is a cultivator lord. How should I put it? There's no need to quarrel over us mortals, is there? In a short time, the people in the courtyard had all left. Only Jiang Wang and the maid remained. "What's your name?" Jiang Wang asked. The maid bowed before replying, "This one's name is Xiao Xiao." Her voice was a bit young and slightly hoarse. She probably wasn't very old, but she'd suffered a lot. "Okay, go and tidy up your room," Jiang Wang casually ordered, then turned around and walked towards the bedroom he'd chosen. After walking a few steps, he turned around again. "I told you to tidy up your own room. Why are you following me?" Although Jiang Wang's voice was already very gentle, Xiao Xiao was still startled. She didn't know where to put her hands. She was particularly terrified and didn't know what to do. Under her messy long hair was a still young face. Right now, one of her eyes was bruised and swollen, while the other was filled with flustered tears. She looked particularly pitiful. Jiang Wang sighed in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. He only pointed to the room on the left. "That's your room." Chapter 202. At the table, Master Gu was drinking wine with a gloomy expression. A young wild cultivator who came out of nowhere dared to go against him. Although Master Guheng didn't do anything at the time, he was secretly angry. Caretaker who carefully flattered him from the side. Halfway through the wine, Guheng suddenly thought of something and glanced at the unopened jar of wine next to him. "This jar of wine is for that brat? If you want to drink it, just open it." Manager who cursed in his heart. This jar of wine cost 20 taels of silver, but he smiled and said, "I'll buy it later." "No." Guheng suddenly smiled and patted the jug of wine with his hand covered in green primal qi. "This jug is good." Manager who was shocked. "Master Gu, you can't do this." Guheng stopped smiling and turned to look at him with a cold gaze. "Why can't I do this?" Manager whose back was covered in cold sweat, but he still braced himself and said, "That's a cultivator. If something really happens, none of us will be able to get away." Although Yang country was small, it was still a country and had its own laws. Just like him, although he often beat up maids, he wouldn't really kill anyone. He would kill as he pleased, unless he had a background that could be easily covered up. Or maybe he didn't want this stable job anymore. "What are you afraid of? He's a wild cultivator of unknown origin. Who would investigate?" Guheng said with dissatisfaction. "Besides, I won't kill him. I'm just teaching him a lesson, so that young people don't know the immensity of heaven and earth." "You really won't kill him?" Manager who was trembling with fear. "Why would I lie to you?" Guheng said and comforted him. "Don't worry, no one will find out. How could the Greenwood Immortal School's methods be ordinary?" A figure was moving quickly on a dark mountain path. "This is the mountain area under the jurisdiction of the Twin Dragons Union. Who are you?" A voice suddenly sounded in the darkness. The Twin Dragons Union was a local sect of Mo country. They obeyed the rule of Mo country's imperial court and had a certain degree of autonomy. Among the sects of Mo country, they weren't weak. This place was already considered the outer region of the Twin Flood Dragon Union. The one who spoke at this time should be a patrolling cultivator of the Twin Flood Dragon Union. Among the crowd, a voice suddenly answered, "The disciples of Zhuang Country's Qinghe County's Taoist Academy are here to arrest the White Bones murderer. Please do us a favor." In the darkness, the voice of the Twin Flood Dragon Association's patrolling cultivator fell silent. If it was in the past, the Twin Flood Dragons would not have given him face. The Mo country and Zhuang country had been in conflict for many years and had never been at a disadvantage. But now Zhuang Di ascended to Dongzhen, together with the Prime Minister Du Ruhui and the great General Huang Fu Duanming, two great deities. The army was strong and the horses were strong, their power was suppressing the four directions. It was the time for them to show their edge. The people of the Zhuang nation also continuously expressed that they should seek a position that was in line with their strength. War was undoubtedly the most direct way. The Mo Kingdom's imperial court had been avoiding this matter because they didn't want to give the Zhuang Kingdom such a reason. Since this was an official business of the Tao Academy disciples arresting a heretical sect like the White Bone sect, the Twin Wyrm Association could turn a blind eye to it. The life spirit stele that had been erected outside Maplewood City had long since spread to everyone's ears. The cultivators of Qinghe County's Tao Academy were not surprised and quickly spread out. Today, they had already destroyed a small stronghold of the White Bone sect and chased the last few disciples here, hoping to obtain enough Tao points. The enmity between the Zhuang nation and the White Bone sect was not just this year. More than 200 years ago, there was a catastrophe caused by the White Bone sect. At that time, the great ancestor, Zhuang Qingqian, used the power of the entire country to destroy the White Bone sect. After that, the White Bone sect revived, but only on a small scale. They were entangled with each other until last year, when the entire country was shocked by the destruction of Maplewood City. However, it was only today that they could hold their heads high and openly arrest criminals on the Mo Kingdom's territory. Only when the country was strong did they have the right to be bold and confident. The cultivators of Qinghe County's Tao Academy spread out in formation and circled around, intending to eliminate the White Bone sect disciples who were pursuing them here. They could not go any deeper, for fear that the twin flood dragons would retaliate. For Li Jianqiu, who had issued the order, it was enough to investigate the situation outside the twin flood dragons. As the most outstanding cultivator of Qinghe County's Tao Academy, he indeed shouldered such a secret mission. Those few White Bone sect disciples escaped all the way here under his purposeful indulgence. To ensure secrecy, the other cultivators did not know about this. They were still immersed in the pride of the country's strength, and at the same time, they were filled with hatred because of the destruction of Maplewood City. Li Jianqiu did not know how many people had the same secret mission as him, but he knew that he was not the only one. The Zhuang nation had been asleep for many years. Now that it had woken up, it was hungry and wanted to eat meat. Looking at the surrounding countries, the Yong nation was the most difficult to eat, and the Mo kingdom might not be easy to eat. But the higher-ups of the Zhuang nation clearly had a target. In the modern world, there were many countries, many sects, and the various great powers were intertwined. For example, the Zhuang nation and the Yong nation were enemies. The Yong nation was stronger than the Zhuang nation, but the Zhuang nation was supported by Taoism. With the support of Taoism, they were able to enjoy the fortune of the country for a long time. Among the Taoist countries, the strongest was the overlord of the central region, the Jing nation. But more specifically, the Jing nation was based on Taoism and had 3 branches. The Zhuang nation belonged to the branch of Mount Yujing. There were all sorts of things like this. In such a complicated world situation, national wars were not easy. One could not just look at what was in front of them. Those who did not consider the overall situation would not be able to conquer a region. Li Jianqiu's work was only a small part of the long process of preparation. The mission given by the higher-ups should be completed, but to Li Jianqiu himself, destroying the White Bone sect was what he cared about the most. Maplewood City was his hometown. In the early years, because of the incident at Shubi Peak, he was used to being alone. But after destroying Shubi Peak last year, he had untied the knot in his heart. He began to accept others. For example, Jiang Wang, Zhao Ruqing, Huang Azan, and his parents and family. They were all gone. They were all gone. If there had to be a specific description of this feeling, it would be the feeling he had when he fled Shubi Peak, crying and wailing on the official road. But it was even worse than that. At that time, he was alone, and now he was even more alone. At that time, he was a stray dog, and now he even felt that he had become a deserter again. When Maplewood City was in trouble, he hid in Qinghe County Academy. When his family, friends, fellow apprentices, and fellow villagers needed him, he was not there. He would never be there. This was the Mo Kingdom, and it was already late at night. Li Jianxiu had already given the order to kill those roaming rats, so he slowed down his steps. There was no need for him to take care of these people himself. He suddenly paused and pressed on the hilt of his sword. It was very quiet all around. The night was supposed to be quiet, but it was too quiet. He could no longer hear the breathing of his fellow apprentices, nor could he feel their heartbeats. Even the faint aura of the patrolling cultivators of the Twin Dragon sect, which was a warning from the Twin Dragon sect to outsiders, had disappeared. In the darkness, in the direction Li Jianxiu was looking, a tall and burly figure with a large ringed saber on his back walked out. "You Zhuang people really don't know what's good for you." He threw the head in his hand over. The head rolled a few times and happened to meet Li Jianxiu's eyes. It was a woman with a delicate face. She was this year's junior sister of the county academy. Li Jianxiu shifted his gaze away from her horrified expression and looked at the tall figure walking out of the darkness. His aura was violent and his face was covered with a tiger bone mask. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.